गुड मॉर्निंग एवरीवन, क्या हाल है? बढ़िया, चलो। यहाँ होनी नहीं चाहिए तुम्हारी क्लास। I have no idea why. चलो, we were discussing demand in the last class. We discussed demand, quantity demanded, law of demand, movement along the curve, shift of the curve. सब discuss कर लिया था हमने. All right, we'll be discussing supply now. If anyone has any questions, please ask. Otherwise, we'll begin. पूछना है किसी को कुछ? क्या चीज़? CDS approach? Underemployment is too subjective to measure. हमने लिखा होगा. अंडर एम्प्लॉयमेंट में देखो, अंडर एम्प्लॉयमेंट में और 2 पेज पलटो. चलो तुम देखो, किसी को पूछना है? एनीथिंग? एनीवन वांट्स टू आस्क? नहीं? चलो, देन लेट्स बिगिन. सप्लाई. What is demand? When do we say demand of something exists? बताओ भाई. बोलो. Ability and willingness to consume. Demand is said to exist when there is both an ability as well as a willingness to consume a good. When you buy something, when you purchase something, that action of buying is an expression of your ability and willingness. As we discussed in the last class, you might be able to buy. You might have capability to buy 100 sticks of ice cream, but you are not buying those 100 sticks. You are buying just 1 stick or 2 stick. So demand is not of 100 sticks. Demand is just of those 2 sticks that you have purchased. Your ability and willingness is expressed in that instance of you buying. Supply refers to production, produce. Ability and willingness to produce some item. That is what is supply. Supply is said to exist when there is both an ability and willingness to produce. I might be willing to start my own coaching center. Willingness, but I am not able. Why? Let's say because I don't have money, I don't have time, I don't have that much desire. As in desire to sorry, willingness ho jayega. But you get the point? Willingness versus ability. The owner of Vision IAS might be capable to open, let's say, a bookshop. Ability है, किताब की शॉप खोलने में कुछ ज़्यादा आपका पैसा नहीं लगेगा. As in जितना पैसा लगेगा उतना पैसा आपके पास है. He might be able, but he is not willing to do that thing. Ability as well as willingness. Ability and willingness to produce is called as supply. Is this clear? Quantity supplied, QS. What is the quantity that we say is supplied, that is of produced of certain good? The actual quantity which is being produced. Let's say you have this place Rajendra Nagar. Ice cream का example लिया था मैंने last class में, demand में. You have this place Rajendra Nagar. Let's say that is our economy. These are the people who are demanding ice cream. And the total quantity of ice cream that is demanded, meaning what is being sold, is let's say 1000 liters. 1000 liter ice cream demand हो रही है. Let's go back to Rajendra Nagar again. In Rajendra Nagar, there will be many people who are willing to produce ice cream. Let's say whenever you taste an ice cream, you say that इससे अच्छी ice cream मैं बना सकता हूँ, या इसका flavor ऐसा होना चाहिए. And there are people who are able to produce. There will be some people who are able as well as willing to produce. They are the producers of ice cream. Those who are able as well as willing. How much quantity of ice cream are they producing? कितनी produce कर रहे हैं? That is what is called as quantity supplied. Actual quantity that is being produced. There are, let's say, ability willingness. मान लेते हैं 5 कारखाने हैं. Let's say there are 5 places where ice cream is produced in Rajendra Nagar. Let's say place number 1 can produce 1000 liters of ice cream per day. Can produce, but is actually producing just 300 liters of ice cream per day. So supply is not of 1000 liters की उसकी कैपेसिटी कितनी है प्रोड्यूस करने की. सप्लाई इज ऑफ 300 liters, वो एक्चुअली कितनी प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है. एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस टू प्रोड्यूस एक्सप्रेस्ड explicitly in the number of units that you are producing. That is what is quantity supplied. Clear है सबको क्या है quantity supplied? The next part is obviously on what factors does quantity supplied depend upon. We have 5 producers. Each one of them might have some capacity. Producers हैं मतलब ability है, ability हमने माना है, इनकी कुछ capacity होगी produce करने के लिए, and they are each of them producing some quantity of ice cream. In the entire economy, this much quantity of ice cream is being produced, actually produce हो रही है. The question is, what is this quantity dependent upon? Get the question? सवाल समझ में आ रहा है? There are some people who can produce a particular item. Ability to produce. Now we have these producers, they are producing some quantity of that particular item. Together these 5 producers are producing some X quantity of ice cream. The question is, what does this X depend upon? कितनी क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं, कितनी क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं, ये किस चीज के ऊपर डिपेंड करेगा? एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस किस चीज के ऊपर डिपेंड करेगी? बताओ. एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस टू प्रोड्यूस. यहाँ पे जैसे हमने डिमांड में सप्लाई को माना था कि देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम ऑफ सप्लाई, हियर डोंट कंसिडर डिमांड. विल कंबाइन दोस टू. आई एम श्योर यू ऑब्वियसली नोट दिस थिंग. विल कंबाइन दोस टू. For the time being, assume that whatever they are able to produce, that is supplying, all that is being demanded. अभी के लिए assume कर लो. But tell me, on what factors will, how much quantity are they producing, will this thing depend upon? किस किस चीज पे डिपेंड करेगा? Availability of raw material. Okay. Availability of raw material. Good. Milk available है कि नहीं? For example, labor का क्या? हाँ, कौन बोल रहा है लेबर? हाँ बोलो. लेबर कॉस्ट. ओके, कॉस्ट ऑफ लेबर. और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एज इन, ओके, infrastructure such as road connectivity for distribution, for getting your supplies, cold storage availability. Good. Investment. हाँ बोलो. Technology. I'm sure everybody can understand technology. Who says? कैसे? Skill of entrepreneurs. चलो यहाँ पे कॉस्ट ऑफ लेबर के साथ साथ स्किल लिख लेते हैं. स्किल ऑफ लेबर इंक्लूडिंग स्किल ऑफ द एंटरप्रेन्योर, द मैनेजमेंट. हाँ, सीजन. ओके, गुड. बिजनेस एनवायरमेंट सच एज, बिजनेस एनवायरमेंट. गुड. ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस. हाँ, गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसीज यहाँ पे आ जाएगा. गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसीज सच एज टैक्स, लेबर, environment laws, contract laws, कई सारे laws. Ease of doing business. Good. What else? Season हो गया. Population. Okay. Size of population. Fine. What else? हाँ, geographical area. कैसे? कोई भी गुड है उसकी रॉ मटेरियल अवेलेबल है या नहीं है, या फिर कंडीशंस ऑफ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग है कि नहीं है. ठीक है, सम जोग्राफिकल फैक्टर्स में इफेक्ट. ओके, सीजन, जोग्राफिकल फैक्टर्स. यहाँ पे आ गया, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के अंदर आ जाएगा. और ठीक है. हाँ, मार्केट क्या? डिमांड तो मैंने माना, डिमांड तो बोल दिया ना, डिमांड कांस्टेंट मान लेते हैं अभी. अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल, कॉस्ट ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल, ठीक है. एनीथिंग एल्स? नंबर ऑफ सेलर, कंपटीशन, गुड. अरे डिमांड, दोबारा से मैं बोल रहा हूँ ना, डिमांड को कांस्टेंट मान लो. भी डिमांड की चिंता नहीं करो, डिमांड और सप्लाई को हम कंबाइन करेंगे. अभी के लिए केवल सप्लाई कि कितना प्रोड्यूस हो रहा है, कितना प्रोड्यूस हो सकता है, हाउ मेनी पीपल आर एबल एंड विलिंग टू प्रोड्यूस, हाउ मच क्वांटिटी आर दे प्रोड्यूसिंग. अभी के लिए केवल ये कंसिडर करते हैं. टैक्स, टैक्स हो गया ना, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस. प्राइस, यू सेड प्राइस, एक्सप्लेन करना पड़ेगा प्राइस, बोलो. प्राइस पे सप्लाई कैसे डिपेंड कर रही है, ये पूछ रहा हूं मैं सवाल. हाँ, मोर, तुम लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई मत बताओ मेरे को. पहले तो इस क्लास में क्लास नहीं होनी चाहिए, और दूसरा तुमको समय पे आना चाहिए. सप्लाई समझ में आ रहा है? व्हाट इज मेंट बाय द टर्म सप्लाई? रीस्टार्ट करते हैं फटाफट. सप्लाई का मतलब क्या है? एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस टू प्रोड्यूस समथिंग. There is an item, there are people who are able as well as willing to produce that thing. Supply is said to exist when there is ability as well as willingness. तो ये हो गई हमारी supply. There is an item, cars. You might want to produce car, but you don't have money to produce car. You don't have technology to produce car. You might be able to produce car, but you don't have willingness to produce a car. Only those who are able and willing to produce car are suppliers of car. Producers, suppliers, anyone who is able as well as willing, supply said to exist with respect to that person. Number one. Number two, quantity supplied. कितनी क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस हो रही है किसी चीज की. देयर इज सम आइटम, इधर देखो सब लोग प्लीज. देयर इज सम आइटम विच इज बीइंग प्रोड्यूस्ड, एंड आइटम इज बीइंग प्रोड्यूस्ड दैट इज सप्लाइड. उसकी कितनी क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस हो रही है रियलिटी में, हाउ मच क्वांटिटी इज बीइंग प्रोड्यूस्ड, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज क्वांटिटी सप्लाइड ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर गुड. Number two. Number three, now we are discussing the most important part as to how much quantity will be supplied. एक गुड है जिसके कुछ प्रोड्यूसर्स हैं. यार क्या प्रॉब्लम है? क्या हो गया? कितने बच्चे हैं बाहर? हाँ, दो हैं, इधर सीट है. और सुनो, अब कोई को मना कर देना भैया, अब मत अलाउ करना अंदर. There is a good, let's say cars, there is a supply of those cars, there are people who are able and willing to produce those cars. How much quantity of that good will be produced? Honda can produce, Honda has capacity, it can produce 5 lakh cars per day, but it is not producing 5 lakh cars per day. Hindustan Unilever is not willing to produce car even though it has capability to produce car. Aditya Birla Group is not producing cars rather because even though they have capability to produce car. कितनी कार एक्चुअल में प्रोड्यूस हो रही है, एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस क्या है, कितनी है उसको, कितनी कार प्रोड्यूस हो रही है उसको बोलेंगे क्वांटिटी सप्लाइड. नाउ बट नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज, कितनी कार्स प्रोड्यूस होंगी किस चीज के ऊपर डिपेंड करेगा? ऑन व्हाट फैक्टर्स विल हाउ मेनी कार्स आर बीइंग प्रोड्यूस्ड डिपेंड अपॉन? सप्लाई इज एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस. Are you able to produce car or not will depend upon many factors. The most important one being the price of the car, or more importantly, profitability. Can you generate profits by producing a car or not? I am a potential producer of anything. मेरे पास पैसा है, मैं प्रोड्यूस कर सकता हूं, लेकिन मेरे पास 3 ऑप्शन है चीजें प्रोड्यूस करने के. मैं आइसक्रीम प्रोड्यूस कर सकता हूं, कपड़ा प्रोड्यूस कर सकता हूं, गाड़ी प्रोड्यूस कर सकता हूं. I have money, I can set up a factory. But there are 3 options that I see. Where can I put my money in? Should I produce ice cream? Should I produce clothes? Should I produce cars? When I produce clothes, I make profit of, let's say, 50%. When I produce cars, I make profit of 20%. When I produce ice cream, I make profit of 60%. तो ice cream profitable ज़्यादा है. So one is profitability. How much profit can I earn by producing certain good? But it is not only about profitability. मैं कितना profit कमा सकता हूँ? There will be many other things that will be required here. For example, to produce ice cream, I would need, let's say, skilled labor. Or maybe to produce cars where profit margins might be higher, I would need skilled labor. I would need investment. I would need infrastructure. I would need a continuous supply of raw material. अगर मैं आइसक्रीम बनाता हूं तो मिल्क परचेज करना पड़ेगा. मिल्क परचेज करने में कई सारी प्रॉब्लम्स आ सकती हैं. सीजनल प्रॉब्लम्स आ सकती हैं मिल्क परचेज करने के अंदर. कभी मिल्क खराब हो जाता है, कभी अवेलेबल नहीं है. आयरन ओर परचेस करने में प्रॉब्लम आ सकती है. कभी लेबर की स्ट्राइक हो रही है, कभी कुछ रेलवे लाइन के अंदर प्रॉब्लम आ गई है. सो आई माइट नॉट बी एबल टू परचेज आयरन ओर एज वेल. There are many risks involved. Am I willing to take those risks or not? It's not merely about profitability. There are other factors also. Is raw material available to me on time or not? What is the quality of raw material that I get? What is the quality of labor that I have? What is the price I have to pay for labor? What is the price of raw material? कई सारे factor determine करेंगे कि मैं कुछ चीज कितनी produce कर रहा हूँ. गवर्नमेंट लॉज डिटरमाइन करेंगे कोई प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है. अगर टैक्स लॉज बहुत डिसइंसेंटिवाइजिंग है, इफ द टैक्स इन द कंट्री इज क्वाइट हाई, मेनी पीपल हु आर विलिंग टू प्रोड्यूस विल बिकम इनकेपेबल टू प्रोड्यूस. व्हाई? बिकॉज दे विल हैव टू पे हाई अमाउंट ऑफ टैक्सेस ऑन दोस ऑन देयर गुड्स. लेबर लॉज कैसे हैं, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लॉज कैसे हैं, हायरिंग पीपल. इफ लेबर लॉज आर डिफिकल्ट, देन देयरफॉर टेक्सटाइल, जो कि एक लेबर इंटेंसिव इंडस्ट्री है, टेक्सटाइल के अंदर कम प्रोड्यूसर्स होंगे, क्योंकि लेबर लॉ के साथ कंप्लाई करना बड़ा डिफिकल्ट है. So ease of doing business country के अंदर कैसा है? There will be many factors that will together determine whether some good is produced or not and how much quantity of that good is produced. An important factor here is price, as all of you already know and you might have guessed. जैसे हमने डिमांड के अंदर किया था, हमने बाकी सारे फैक्टर्स को कांस्टेंट मान लिया था. ये फैक्टर्स कैसे सप्लाई डिटरमाइन कर रहे हैं, इन्फ्लुएंस कर रहे हैं, तो समझ में आ रहा है ना कि कंपटीशन है कि नहीं. कंपटीशन और प्राइस को हम एक साथ देख लेते हैं. अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल है कि नहीं है, कॉस्ट ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल कितना है, क्वालिटी ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल कैसा है, कॉस्ट ऑफ लेबर, स्किल ऑफ लेबर, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अवेलेबल है कि नहीं है. इफ देयर इज नो कोल्ड स्टोरेज इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, आइसक्रीम की बाकी सब चीजें होंगी लेकिन आइसक्रीम फिर भी प्रोड्यूस नहीं हो सकती क्योंकि कोल्ड स्टोरेज इंफ्रा नहीं है कंट्री के अंदर. इन्वेस्टमेंट कैसा है, क्वालिटी ऑफ मशीन्स कैसी हैं. इफ यू हैव पुअर क्वालिटी ऑफ प्रिमिटिव मशीन्स, देन producing cars might not be favorable. Then you will have to, let's say, do with textiles only. अगर machines country के अंदर अच्छी नहीं है तो. टेक्नोलॉजी कैसी है, सीजन कौन सा है, रॉ मटेरियल डिपेंड करेगा उस चीज, रॉ मटेरियल डिटरमाइन करेगा. इफ अ कंट्री हैज फॉर एग्जांपल वेट सीजन, ह्यूमिड सीजन ऑल थ्रू for most of the year, then cotton will not be producible in that country, and because cotton is not producible, the country will not be able to develop textile industry. Then season depend करेगा. Business environment as we discussed, ease of doing business, tax laws, labor laws, ये सब कैसे हैं. All these factors are going to affect whether a good is produced or not and how much quantity of that good is produced. So this is what supply is. Now as we did in our demand part, demand में हमने क्या किया था, demand में हमने बाकी सारे factors को constant माना था और देखा था कि भाई how does quantity demanded depend upon price, how does quantity supplied depend upon price. Price, थोड़ी सी price के ऊपर चर्चा कर लेते हैं. What do you understand by the word price? डिमांड में तो बड़ी जल्दी मान गए थे. हमने डिमांड में क्या रिलेशनशिप देखा था, QD is inversely proportional to P. ये हमारा लॉ ऑफ डिमांड था. Why is demand inversely proportional to price? Why? नहीं, लॉ ऑफ नहीं, सवाल समझो पहले. डिमांड प्राइस के इनवर्सली प्रोपोर्शनल क्यों है? अगर प्राइस बढ़ता है तो डिमांड कम क्यों होती है? कोई एक व्यक्ति आंसर दो. अफोर्डेबिलिटी. When price increases, the good becomes less affordable, right? You have some income, assuming other factors as constant, meaning let's say your income is constant, you have some income, the good had a price X, now the good has a price X plus Y. Because the goods price has increased, it is now less affordable for you, hence you purchase less of it, right? लॉ ऑफ डिमांड काफी इंट्यूटिव है कि नहीं है? It's very intuitive, as in the price will increase, the demand will fall. Why is it intuitive? Because all of you apply this law of demand upon yourself. You apply it in yourself, you think about yourself that if some good becomes expensive, I will buy less of it, and because I am buying less of it, many other people will also buy less of it, and therefore the demand of the good is going to fall. That is how you understand law of demand. ये clear हो रहा है ना सबको? सप्लाई में हम एग्जैक्टली यही काम करने वाले हैं, हम बाकी सब चीजों को कांस्टेंट मानेंगे और देखेंगे कि हाउ इज क्यूएस प्रोपोर्शन, हाउ इज क्यूएस रिलेटेड टू पी. क्या है लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई? बता दो, मालूम होगा ही तुमको. क्यूएस इज डायरेक्टली प्रोपोर्शनल टू पी, है ना? ये हमारा लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई है. क्यूएस इज डायरेक्टली प्रोपोर्शनल टू पी. Law of demand is QD is inversely proportional to price. Law of supply is QS is directly proportional to P, meaning when price increases, supply increases. When price increases, demand falls. When price increases, supply decreases. समझ में आ रहा है? चेहरे से तो नहीं लग रहा तुम्हारे. डिमांड लॉ देखो और सप्लाई लॉ देखो. पहले तो याद कर लो. याद तो हो गया? एज आई सेड, इसलिए डिस्टर्बेंस बार बार नहीं. एज आई सेड, ये जो डिमांड लॉ है ये बहुत इंट्यूटिव है. When price will increase, the good will become unaffordable, hence you are going to buy less of that, and not just you, many people will buy less of that, and therefore demand of the good, how much of the good is being demanded in the economy, the demand will fall. When price increases, demand falls. Supply intuitive nahi hai. As in, I don't think so it is intuitive. What does law of supply state? Law of supply state that assuming every other factor that determines supply of a good as constant, the supply of the good, कितनी quantity produce हो रही है, supply of the good will vary directly with price. मतलब जब price बढ़ेगा तब supply बढ़नी चाहिए. Supply should increase when the price increases. Why should supply increase when the price increases? जब किसी चीज का price बढ़ेगा, assuming other factors as constant, why should supply increase? To understand this, we have to understand this term price. Price समझना पड़ेगा हमको क्या है. What determines price? Who determines price? Market. What is this market that you say that determines price? चलो अब ध्यान से सुनना इधर, अब कंसंट्रेशन इधर पूरी रखो. अब जो डिस्टर्बेंसेस होने थे प्रॉब्ली हो गए हैं, अब शायद नहीं डिस्टर्बेंस होगा. अभी तो देखो ध्यान से. प्राइस. व्हाट इज मेंट बाय द वर्ड प्राइस? प्राइस इज सिंपली द वैल्यू एट विच अ गुड इज एक्सचेंज बिटवीन टू विलिंग एंटिटीज. देयर इज सम आइटम, you have this, I want this, I have some value of this item in my mind, you want to sell it at some value, we will negotiate and we'll arrive at a negotiated value, the actual value at which is exchange will take place. That is basically the price of some item. Price. Because all of us are consumers, we believe that or we think that the price of an item is set by the producer. Producer sets the price. Now some of you have said that it is a market that sets the price. Others might also probably think about this, that market sets the price. आपने विजनाय ज्वाइन करने के लिए जो कोचिंग फीस दी है उसका प्राइस क्या किसी और ने लिखा है? हमने सेट किया, किसी और ने सेट किया उसका प्राइस? अमूल जो आइसक्रीम अपनी बेच रहा है आपको, अमूल की आइसक्रीम के पैकेट के ऊपर किसने प्राइस लिखा है? वहां पे अमूल ने लिखा है, क्वालिटी ने लिखा है, वर्डिला किसने लिखा है? अमूल हैज रिटन दैट प्राइस. Haldiram is selling dosas to you, Adidas is selling shoes to you, Reebok is selling shoes to you. Who is writing, who is stamping the price on all the goods that any producer is selling? It is a producer that is stamping that price. Producer writes that price. A producer decides at what price am I going to sell my produce. Because we are all consumers, we like to see that. क्या हम negotiate करते हैं क्या कि आइसक्रीम 15 रुपए की है भैया उसको 12 रुपए में दे देना? क्या आप नेगोशिएट करते हो कि आपकी कोचिंग की फीस 2 लाख रुपए, इसको मेरे लिए 1.5 लाख रुपया कर दो? यू मे वांट दैट, लेट्स से बिकॉज लेट्स से आई कम फ्रॉम ईडब्ल्यू सेक्शन, सो गिव मी लेट्स से सम डिस्काउंट. The producer sets the price, the producer writes the price, and the consumer takes that price. When it came to law of demand, you all assumed in the background that price मतलब producer ने जो price set किया है अपने गुड का वो बढ़ जाएगा, अमूल ने जो आइसक्रीम का प्राइस सेट किया है वो बढ़ जाएगा, होंडा ने जो गाड़ी का प्राइस सेट किया है वो बढ़ जाएगा, क्योंकि उसका प्राइस बढ़ जाएगा, hence it will become less affordable, therefore you are going to demand less of that quantity. Now what is supply law saying? Supply law is saying that when price increases, supply will increase. When price increases, supply will increase. Price तो माइंड में यही चल रहा है कि प्रोड्यूसर ने सेट कर रखा है. It is not the producer that sets the price. It is, as you said, it is a market that sets the price. अब market को समझो क्या है. It is not one consumer that sets the price. It is not one producer that sets the price. It is not all consumers taken together that set the price. It is not all producers taken together that set the price. It is all consumers and all producers taken together that set the price. Market set the price का मतलब क्या है? सारे producer, सारे consumer मिलके price set करते हैं. Now, how does market set the price? इसका मतलब क्या कि all producers, all consumers taken together, they set the price. इस चीज का मतलब क्या है? Market sets the price, consumers and producers take that price. They are price takers. Market is the price setter. Consumers as well as producers, all of them are price takers. Price setter versus price taker. Adidas might stamp the price on its shoes. कितने का जूता बिकना है वो एडिडास लिखेगा अपने जूते के ऊपर, that this is the cost of this is the price at which we are going to sell this shoe. So it seems to the naked eye that Adidas is price setter. It is not price setter. For the time being, assume that the shoe that Adidas is selling, that shoe is non-differentiable from the shoe that Nike or Reebok or Skechers or anybody else is selling. अगर एक ऐसा गुड है जो कि प्रोड्यूसर्स प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं जो कि बिल्कुल भी डिस्टिंक्ट नहीं है किसी और गुड से, एज इन कोई और प्रोड्यूसर जो सेम गुड प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है, will any producer be able to sell their good at any different price from anyone else? If anyone sells their good at a higher price and at a lower price you get exactly the same good, will anybody be willing to pay the higher price for that good? No, nobody will be willing to pay that higher price. If goods are completely same, if goods are non-distinct, तो कोई भी अपना प्राइस जो है अपने गुड का प्राइस ज्यादा नहीं रख सकता है, ज्यादा कम कुछ नहीं रख सकता है. अगर कोई कम रखेगा तो उसके गुड्स फटाफट सेल हो जाएंगे, गुड्स सेल हो जाएंगे, that means he will not have capability to meet all the demand. That means others जो अब रह जाएंगे, others whatever the price they are selling at, the good will be sold at that particular price only. So if there is a good in which there is no one who is able to produce any kind of distinct good, कोई distinct feature नहीं है, अगर good perfectly same है, in that case no producer will be able to set the price higher or lower than what others are selling at. Producer फिर price setter नहीं रह जाएगा. अब रियलिटी में गुड्स क्या होते हैं? रियलिटी में गुड्स होते हैं सिमिलर रादर देन सेम. गुड्स आर सिमिलर नॉट सेम. Because goods are similar and not exactly same, therefore there are some distinguishing features. And because there are some distinguishing features, producers have some ability, not complete, but some ability to set the price. Let's say Vision IS says that we are selling our services at 2 lakh rupees and we have, let's say, good mentors, good teachers, good material, good quality classrooms, etc. We sell these things. And therefore, let's say we charge some premium on the fees. As compared to other institutes, let's say we charge some premium. तो मान लेते हैं बाकी जगह आपको 1.5 लाख रुपए देना पड़ रहा है, हमारे आपको 1,80,000 रुपए देना पड़ रहा है, just for example. We can command some premium, but does that mean that we can keep our fees at 4 lakh rupees? अगर हम 4 लाख रुपए फीस रखेंगे और बाकी सब जगह फीस जो है 2 लाख रुपए है, तो कोई भी हमारे नहीं आने वाला है. Because the goods are similar, not exactly the same, the producers get some ability to distinctively price their goods. Some ability, but not full ability. जहां पे परफेक्ट कंपटीशन होगा, मतलब गुड्स बिल्कुल सेम है, कोई भी प्रोड्यूसर गुड को प्रोड्यूस कर सकता है, वहां पे देयर इज नो एबिलिटी ऑफ एनी प्रोड्यूसर टू सेट द प्राइस। वर्सेस जहां पे इम्परफेक्ट कंपटीशन होगा, जहां पे गुड्स सिमिलर नेचर के होंगे, वहां पे प्रोड्यूसर्स कैन सेट द प्राइस अप टू सम एक्सटेंट, बट इवन देन वी से दैट द एबिलिटी टू सेट द प्राइस इज लिमिटेड, इट्स नॉट अनलिमिटेड। Therefore, it is the producers and consumers taken together, supply and demand taken together, that determines the price. Producers, like consumers, are also price setters. They are not price takers. Haldiram can say that I am selling dosa, which is not a unique good. But when you come to my premises, you will have, let's say, a hygienic environment and air conditioned where you can sit and have chat with your friends. तो आप मेरे यहाँ की ये additional services भी ले सकते हो. And that is why I am able to sell this good that you can get outside also for 50 rupees for 200 rupees. But if Haldiram set the price of dosa at 1000 rupees, nobody is going to go to Haldiram and get that dosa. Haldiram has some ability to set the price, but not full ability to set the price. Producers, like consumers, are price setters. They are not price takers. Is this clear? So ये है हमारा price. अब प्राइस का सप्लाई से क्या रिलेशनशिप है? प्राइस सबको समझ में आ गया क्या है? प्राइस is set by the market. We'll discuss exactly how does market sets the price, but for the time being, understand that producers don't set the price. Like consumers who take the price, producers also take the price. Now, how is price related to supply? प्राइस और सप्लाई का क्या रिलेशनशिप है? हमने लिखा है क्वांटिटी लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई, बट वी आर नॉट ट्राइंग टू इंट्यूटिवली अंडरस्टैंड दैट व्हाट डज दिस मीन. लेट्स टेक एग्जांपल ऑफ अ प्रोडक्ट वेयर देयर इज परफेक्ट कंपटीशन. बहुत ध्यान से सुनना, एग्जांपल अच्छे समझ में आ जाएगा और लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई बिल्कुल क्लियर हो जाएगा आपको. मान लेते हैं कि एक ऐसा गुड है जहां पे परफेक्ट कंपटीशन है. परफेक्ट कंपटीशन का मतलब क्या है कि गुड्स बिल्कुल भी डिस्टिंक्ट नहीं है आपस में. गुड्स आर परफेक्टली सेम, नॉट जस्ट सिमिलर, दे आर एग्जैक्टली द सेम गुड, मीनिंग no producer has any ability to set the price higher or lower than what the market has dictated to them. There is some market price and that price is taken by everybody. Let's take a good which is completely non-distinguishable. Let's say for example LED lights. जैसे दिवाली की लाइट्स होती हैं, बिल्कुल आप खरीदते हो, आपको पता थोड़ा ना आपने कौन से ब्रांड की खरीदी है. They are completely same items. There is a good, let's say Diwali lights. These are all the people who have ability to produce, capable to produce हैं, produce कर सकते हैं. या फिर पहले willingness से start करते हैं. These are all the producers who are willing to produce. I'm sorry, I'll repeat. These are all the producers who are willing to produce that particular item. Willingness है, बनाना चाहते हैं, अलग अलग कलर्स की अपनी लाइट को अच्छा बनाना चाहते हैं, but there is a market price of that item. Let's say 200 rupees. एक लड़ी जो है वो 200 रुपए की आती है. These are the ones who are willing to produce. She produces it the same good for 50 rupees one piece. Why? Because let's say she has better quality machines or cheaper labor, whatever. She is able to produce that item for 50 rupees. He is able to produce at 80 rupees. Somebody else at 120 rupees. Somebody else at 150 rupees. Somebody else at 195 rupees. She wants to produce, but her cost of production is 220 rupees. His cost is 250 rupees, somebody else's cost is 240, somebody else's cost is 300 rupees. तो ये मेरा प्रोड्यूसर का यूनिवर्स है, और इस प्रोड्यूसर के यूनिवर्स में एक आइटम है, फॉर एग्जांपल दीज दिवाली लाइट्स, एंड देयर आर डिफरेंट प्रोड्यूसर्स हु कैन प्रोड्यूस द सेम आइटम फॉर अ डिफरेंट प्राइस. Why a different price? Because of all other factors. Somebody is located close to the place where raw materials are found, that means their cost of production would be less. Somebody is able to get cheaper and skilled labor, hence their cost of production is less. Somebody operates in a state where labor laws are not that strict, hence their cost of production is less. Point is, there are different producers who all incur different cost of production. Given that market price, अब market price item का same है, market price 200 रुपए, market ने determine किया price 200 रुपए. अगर market price 200 रुपए है, तो इसमें से कौन कौन लोग इस item को produce कर सकते हैं? Who are all the people who can produce this particular item? Who can produce this item? Question समझो. There is an item indistinguishable from each other, whose market price is 200 rupees. There are potential producers, willing people, but each of them incurs a different cost of production. Somebody produce at 80, somebody at 90, somebody at 120, somebody at 180, somebody at 200, somebody at 250. अगर मार्केट प्राइस 200 रुपए है तो कौन इस गुड को प्रोड्यूस कर सकता है? Anyone whose cost of production is less than 200 will be not just willing but also able to produce that good. Why? Because now they can earn a profit. Even 1 rupee profit, meaning let's say you have profit, अब वहां पे कुछ आपका ये सवाल आ जाएगा कि आप टेक्सटाइल प्रोड्यूस करो कि दिवाली लाइट प्रोड्यूस करो, आइसक्रीम प्रोड्यूस करो, बट लेट्स से एनीबडी who is able to earn some profit can produce this particular good, ability to produce. She is producing the same good at 80 rupees. Market allows her to sell this good at 200 rupees, meaning she earns a profit of 120 rupees. She produces the same good for 150 rupees. The market allows her to sell it at 200 rupees. She earns a profit of 50 rupees. She has some capacity to produce. ये एक दिन में या एक महीने में 1000 लाइट्स प्रोड्यूस कर सकती हैं at the cost of 80 rupees per light. Whatever her capacity is, 1000 lights per month, ये पूरा का पूरा सेल कर देती हैं मार्केट के अंदर. Listen to the statements carefully. She can produce 1000 lights. The cost of production is 80 rupees per light and the market price is 200 rupees per light. Because she is able to sell all of her production, does she have any willingness to reduce the price of the item? जब इनकी पूरी कैपेसिटी इस्तेमाल हो गई है, इनके पास 1000 लाइट बनाने की क्षमता है, कैपेसिटी. Her cost is 80 rupees. And the market is allowing her to sell at 200 rupees, a profit of 120 rupees per piece. अगर इनकी कैपेसिटी पूरी तरह यूटिलाइज नहीं हुई होती तब तो इनके पास एक इंसेंटिव था कि भाई ये और प्रोड्यूस कर लेती, प्राइस कम करने की कोशिश करती, इससे पूरी कैपेसिटी यूटिलाइज हो जाती. हर कैपेसिटी इज बीइंग फुली यूटिलाइज्ड. शी इज एबल टू अर्न अ हैंडसम प्रॉफिट ऑफ 120 rupees. इज देयर एनी इंसेंटिव फॉर हर टू सेल हर प्रोड्यूस एट अ लेसर प्राइस? No, she will sell at 200 rupees only. She will take entire 120 rupees. Why? Because her capacity is fully utilized. Anybody who is able to produce at a price of 200 or less, they are producing this item, they are fully utilized. Why would they sell at any lower price? There is some demand, there is some supply. Demand supply के basis के ऊपर market price 200 रुपए निकल के आया है. Anyone who can produce the good at a price of 200 or less will be selling the good at 200 rupees in the market. कोई भी व्यक्ति जो कि प्राइस 200 रुपए से कम में बना सकता था, अगर मार्केट अलाउ कर रही है आपको 200 रुपए के ऊपर सेल करना, तो आप क्यों नहीं 200 रुपए के ऊपर सेल करोगे? Someone's profit is 120 rupees, someone profit is 80 rupees, someone profit is 5 rupees, but everybody is making these profits. But somebody whose cost is 220 rupees, जो 220 रुपए बना रहा है, now that person is in a loss. Because you are in a loss, hence you will not be able to produce this item. तो 200 रुपए मार्केट प्राइस है, आपकी कॉस्ट 220 रुपीज है, hence you are not able to produce. Because of some reason, market price increases. How does it increase? We'll discuss in the next section. Demand and supply. It is a market that determines the price. Consumers and producers taken together. Not consumers, not producers, not one producer, not one consumer. Everybody taken together determines the price. Let's say demand increases and as a result of that price of Diwali lights increases. तो अब जो चीज 200 रुपए की मिल रही थी मार्केट में, अब वो चीज 250 रुपए की हो गई, 250 रुपीस की हो गई है. What happens when price increases? अगर प्राइस बढ़ेगा, what will happen now? When price of these items increase, what is going to happen? All those who were willing to produce but not able to produce. Why? Because their cost of production was more than the market price. What will happen to their ability to produce? They will now become able to produce or not? मार्केट प्राइस 200 रुपए था, आपकी कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन 220 रुपए की थी, because your cost was 220, hence you are not able to produce, ability to produce. Now market price is increased to 250 rupees. Your cost is 220, or let's say increased to 230 rupees, but now have you not become able to produce? Number of people who are able to produce this item has increased or not? Ability. What happens to supply therefore? Increases. Price increases, supply increases. Visualize हुआ? Price increase हुआ, supply कैसे increase हुई? Because now more people who are able to produce enter the production process. There were people who were willing to produce but not able to produce. But because price has increased, now some of them have also become able to produce. Ability and willingness. There were some people who might have produced earlier but were not willing to produce this good earlier. विलिंगनेस नहीं थी, इनको लग रहा था कि जो है दिवाली लाइट बनाने के अंदर प्रॉफिट शायद ज्यादा नहीं होगा या फिर not so attractive to produce. You could have produced but you were not willing. Now what do you see? You see यार वो तो 80 रुपए बना रही है और 250 रुपए के अंदर बेच रही है. Maybe because of increase in prices, her profit earlier was 120 rupees, 80, 120, 80 and 200. And now she is able to sell at 250 rupees. Maybe her cost has increased from 80 to 100 rupees. की cost भी बढ़ गई होगी, 80 रुपए से 100 रुपए हो गई. लेकिन profit भी तो बढ़ गया ना, 150 रुपए profit हो गया है. What happens to those people who are sitting on fence? What do they see? They see that there are people in this kind of business who are able to earn a profit of 150 rupees per unit. 150% का प्रॉफिट आप कमा रहे हो. 100 रुपए की कॉस्ट है, 250 रुपए में बेच रहे हो, 150% is the profit that you are earning. That means it's a very profitable business. What happens to some people's willingness to enter this business? The business becomes more profitable. As a result, more people will be willing to pursue this business or not. Both willingness as well as ability increases. Ability and willingness increases and therefore supply increases. Ab visualize hua? Law of supply. I'll quickly recap. Supply refers to ability and willingness to produce. Number one. Quantity supplied means how much quantity of a good is being produced. The question is, what does quantity supplied depend upon? There are many factors that influence quantity supplied. How much quantity of an item will be produced? The price of that item determines. We'll write down about price also. The price of the item determines how much quantity will be produced. Apart from price, let's quickly look at other factors. Competition, क्योंकि competition directly price को determine करे. ज़्यादा producers होंगे तो competition ज़्यादा होगा. Market price. Availability of raw material, quality of raw materials, supply of raw materials, availability of labor, skill of labor, wages that you are going to give to your labor, the business laws that exist in the country, labor laws, tax laws, environment laws, ये सब चीज डिटरमाइन करेंगी कि कोई भी गुड है उसमें लोगों की एबिलिटी एंड विलिंगनेस टू प्रोड्यूस कितनी है या नहीं है, कितना गुड वो प्रोड्यूस करना चाहते हैं. There are many factors that will determine supply of the item. Infrastructure, investment, raw material, labor, other factors of production, all these things determine how much quantity of a good is being supplied. The law of supply states that assuming every other factors that determine supply as constant, the quantity supplied varies inversely with price. Meaning when price increases, quantity supplied will increase. Independent variable, dependent variable. Price changes independently. जब price बढ़ेगा तब supply पे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा? Supply law बोल रहा है जब price बढ़ेगा तब supply बढ़ेगी. It is going to increase. Why does it happen? As in, why does QS increases when price increases? For that we have to understand this thing called as price. What is price? Price is the value at which a good is exchanged between two parties. Price is not determined by a consumer or consumers only, a producer or producers only. Price is determined by what we call as the market, meaning everybody taken together, all producers, all consumers taken together, that is what determines the price. Producers are not price setters, producers are price takers. In a competitive environment, when there is perfect competition, producers are price takers. Because market is most of the times not perfectly competitive, producers may have some ability to set the price but not complete ability to set the price. They may increase the price of their good in some range but not beyond that particular range. So producers, like consumers, are price takers, not price setters. It is market that sets the price. When price of a good increases, what happens is some of the people who were earlier unable to produce, they also become able to produce that good. As a result of that, supply will increase. Number one. Second, some people who were not willing to produce that good may also become willing to produce that good. As a result, willingness also increases. So therefore, both ability and willingness to produce increases. That is why we say supply increases. QS increases when P increases. This is what law of supply states. Clear? सबको आ रहा है समझ में? ग्राफ इजीली ड्रॉ कर सकते हो. Upward sloping, downward sloping. Upward sloping. This is how we draw supply graph. This is supply. This is price on y-axis, quantity on x-axis. Since P1 less than P2, therefore Q1 less than Q2. This is our supply graph. Clear to everybody? ठीक है, लिखो, राइट डाउन. सप्लाई, थोड़ा दिमाग खोल के सोच समझ के लिखना, बिकॉज क्योंकि डिस्टर्बेंसेस काफ़ी हुए थे, तो जो भी चीज़ अगर मिसिंग होगी तो वो क्लियर हो जाएगी लिखते हुए. राइट डाउन सप्लाई. सप्लाई ऑफ अ गुड, सप्लाई ऑफ अ गुड is said to exist. Supply of a good is said to exist when there is both an ability, when there is both an ability as well as willingness to produce it. When there is both an ability as well as willingness to produce it. Next line में quantity supplied bracket में QS, quantity supplied QS. The total quantity that the producers of a good are able and willing to produce. The total quantity that the producers of a good are able and willing to produce. Full stop. Supply, same line में लिखना, supply, that is production is expressed in the actual number of units or quantity of a good which is being produced. Full stop. QS, that is the ability and willingness. QS, that is the ability and willingness to produce a good. Depends on factors such as अब लिस्ट फॉर्म में लिखना, जैसे डिमांड में लिखा था हमने लिस्ट फॉर्म में, राइट इन दैट फॉर्म. प्राइस, सबसे पहले लिखो प्राइस, और प्राइस के आगे स्टार मार्क कर लो. हम नीचे प्राइस के बारे में और लिखेंगे, स्टार मार्क कर लो. और प्राइस के ही ब्रैकेट में लिख लो, ब्रैकेट में लिखो प्राइस के प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी. Okay, next write down. Next line में availability, comma cost and quality of raw materials. Availability, cost and quality of raw materials. Next, wages and skill of workers. Wages and skills of workers. Next, cost of other FOP. Cost of other FOP, such as interest and rent. Such as interest and rent. Cost of other factors of production. Cost of other factors of production, such as interest and rent. Next, infrastructure. Supporting infrastructure, supporting industrial development. Next, investments, comma, especially in capital goods. Investments, comma, especially in capital goods, comma, and in R&D. Investments in capital goods, machines, and R&D, research and development. Next, business environment. Business environment dash, इसी में आगे कंटिन्यू करना. Business environment dash, ease of doing business, ब्रैकेट में EODB. Business environment, ब्रैकेट में as in dash, ease of doing business, ब्रैकेट में EODB. such as tax laws, labor laws, environment laws, etc. Tax, labor, environment laws, etc. Alright, अब next line में लिखो law of supply. Law of supply. It states dash quotes में लिखना, quotes में, write in quotes. It states dash, assuming all other factors that determine supply of a good, assuming all other factors that determine supply of a good, comma, except price as constant, except price के बाद comma, except price, comma, as constant, comma, the quantity supplied, bracket में QS, the quantity supplied varies directly with price. The quantity supplied varies directly with price. Full stop. This means that as the price of the good increases, comma, more producers would become able and willing, comma, and thus supply increases, dash लगाओ, dash, an increase in profitability would enable an increase in profitability would enable more producers to enter the production process, comma, enable existing producers to undertake investments to undertake investments for expansion, comma, and hence would increase production, draw the curve, and then we'll write down about price. Y-axis पे price, x पे quantity. Simply draw this supply curve S. P1, P2, Q1, Q2. Since P1 less than P2, Q1 is less than Q2. Oh, sorry. QS proportional to P, other factors constant. P and Q, y-axis and x-axis, P1, P2, Q1, Q2. Since P1 less than P2, therefore Q1 less than Q2. Done. Star mark करके लिखो price. Write down about this thing called as price. Price. लिखो. लिखो. Price is the value. Price is the value at which. Price is the value at which a good is exchanged. A good is exchanged between two willing entities. What's up? The supplier and demander. The supplier and demander. The supplier and demander, comma, in that instance, may negotiate. Supplier and demander in that instance may negotiate and determine the price. That is the value of exchange. That is the value of exchange. Full stop. However, comma, individually, they have only a limited capacity. Individually, they have only a limited capacity to influence it. Full stop. It is all the producers and consumers taken together. It is all the producers and consumers taken together. That is the market. That sets the price. Next paragraph में लिखना. Ideally, comma, in a perfect competition. Ideally, in a perfect competition. In a perfect competition, dash लगाओ, dash. When all producers produce exactly the same good. When all producers produce exactly the same good. comma, and there are no barriers, and there are no barriers to enter or exit from the production process, ideally in a perfect competition, that is when all producers produce exactly the same good and there are no barriers to enter or exit from the production process, comma, no producer would have the ability to sell their goods at any price different from the others, at any price different from the others. ये जरा एक बार पैराग्राफ पढ़ लो, ये पूरी एक ही लाइन है, कहीं पे फुल स्टॉप नहीं आया आइडियल से लेके यहाँ तक, सो प्लीज़ रीड इट, ग्रामेटिकल मिस्टेक नहीं होनी चाहिए, एक बार पढ़ लो समझ में आ जाएगा, फिर आगे लिखते हैं. ठीक है, कोई प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं है. कॉमा अगर सही लगाए होंगे तो फिर यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड, तो इसलिए कॉमा का बहुत ध्यान रखना. ऑलराइट, नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ में लिखो, in reality comma however, comma, the goods are not same, comma, but only similar. The goods are not same but only similar. Full stop. Hence, full stop के बाद hence, producers do enjoy some pricing power. Full stop. Therefore, comma, even though it may seem that producers set the price, comma, their ability to do so is limited. First of hence, comma, like consumers, comma, producers are also price takers. ब्रैकेट में क्लास लाइन लिख लो, इन ब्रैकेट राइट डाउन. मोनोपोली में क्या होगा? मोनोपोली में प्रोड्यूसर के पास प्राइसिंग पावर है, फुल प्राइसिंग पावर है, लिख लो ब्रैकेट में. इन अ मोनोपोली they are price setters. In a monopoly they are price setters. So ठीक है, एक बार you have exactly 2 minutes. I'll start the next topic after 2 minutes. Read quickly. Price वाला पार्ट पढ़ लो. Price. जिन्होंने पढ़ लिया वो लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई पढ़ो, पहले पढ़ लो, पहले पढ़ लो फिर उसका लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई। लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई जो हमने पूरी एक्सप्लेनेशन लिखी है। पहले प्राइस पढ़ना फिर लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई पढ़ना। एक मिनट रुक जाओ। हाँ जी बोलो। और किसने यहाँ से आवाज़ लगाई थी? हाँ जी बोलो। अच्छा ठीक है, और कुछ? ये बहुत आसान सी लाइन है, ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स ने ही पूछा है, मैं बता देता हूँ एक मिनट में। नो बैरियर्स टू एंटर और एग्जिट फ्रॉम द प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस, बहुत आसान सी चीज़ है। बैरियर्स टू एंट्री और बैरियर्स टू एग्जिट का मतलब ये है कि देर इज अ गुड, anybody can at any time come and start producing that good. If there are barriers to entry, for example, to start a business you need to spend a lot of money initially, तो जो पैसा आपको खर्च करना है वो क्या हो गया, एक एंट्री बैरियर हो गया है। आई हैव टू स्पेंड लॉट ऑफ मनी। देयर इज सम बिजनेस जैसे मेकिंग ऑफ कार्स, अब कार प्रोडक्शन के लिए मेरे को पहले काफ़ी पैसा खर्च करना पड़ेगा और फिर पैसा रिकवर काफ़ी टाइम में जाके होगा। इनिशियल फैक्ट्री लगानी पड़ेगी, रोबोट्स एंड ऑल दिस थिंग्स। इट इज़ अ बैरियर टू एंट्री। इज इट क्लियर? एंट्री बैरियर क्या है? सो इफ इन एन आइडियल वर्ल्ड कंपटीशन, परफेक्ट कंपटीशन जो कि एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता है, बट हम क्या बोलते हैं, जहाँ पे कोई भी एंट्री बैरियर नहीं है, एग्जिट अभी एक मिनट में बता रहा हूँ, एंड गुड्स आर एग्जैक्टली द सेम। Why is this condition of entry barrier and exit barrier important? Because if there are entry barriers, that means there will be only limited number of firms that can produce. Because there are limited number of firms, तो वहाँ पे perfect competition नहीं हो पाएगा। These were the people who are right now producing Diwali lights. There are others who want to produce or who can produce. But because there are entry barriers to production, they will not be able to, most of them will not be able to enter the production process. तो ये entry barrier का मतलब है। Similarly, exit barrier का मतलब क्या है? Exit barrier का मतलब है, let's say your firm is in losses, market price has decreased, you entered the production because you are producing at 220 rupees, market price was 250 rupees, 250 रुपये market price हो गया था और आप production के अंदर आ गए थे, even though your cost was 220 rupees, but now because of some reason price has fallen down from 250 to 200 rupees again, तो अब आपको loss नहीं होने लग गया है। But will you now immediately stop producing the good? You will now wait for some time, you will bear the losses for some time. Even though your cost is 220 rupees and the market price is 200 rupees, but because you have spent a lot of money to enter the production, you can't exit the process immediately. There are barriers to exit as well. जो entry का barrier था वही almost आपका exit का barrier भी है, क्योंकि exit पे भी barrier लगा हुआ है, you will continue to produce the good even with some losses as well for some time. तो इसको बोलते हैं entry barrier and exit barrier. तो ये हमारी condition important, assumption important हो जाती है to assume that there is perfect competition. If there will be barriers to entry or exit, more producers will not be able to come up and hence competition will not be able to prop up in a particular thing. तो ये एक assumption है simply. All right. Now we know that what demand is, what supply is. Now we'll discuss markets. सब लोग पेन नीचे रखो, इधर देखो, अब लिखना नहीं आप। I'm sure most of you, probably all of you would have looked at this. Demand, supply, क्या बोलते हैं इस प्राइस को, बता दो फटाफट। इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस है ना, ठीक है, भूल जाओ, इधर देखो। This is our demand graph, demand curve, QD inversely proportional to P, supply curve, QS directly proportional to P. There is a good, ice cream, potatoes, Diwali lights, cars, whatever. There is some good, and there exists a demand schedule, a demand graph of that good. QD inversely proportional to P. Does this graph tell me what is the market price or quantity of the good? क्या यह मेरे को ये बता रहा है कि गुड की प्राइस मार्केट में कितना है और कितनी क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस हो रही है? No, it is not telling me anything about what is the goods price or the goods quantity that is being demanded. It simply tells me a relationship between price and quantity. It is simply telling me that had the price been this, then this much quantity would have been demanded. Had it been lower than this, more quantity would have been demanded. Had been lower, more quantity would have been demanded. It is not telling कि market में price क्या है, कितनी quantity demand हो रही है. केवल ये एक relationship बता रहा है. Exactly same thing here also. This graph, supply graph, it is not telling that how much quantity is being produced at what price. It is simply telling that had this been the price, then this much quantity would have been produced. Had the price been more people would have been able and willing, and this would have been the quantity produced. Had the price been greater, more quantity would have been produced. It is not telling us anything about what is the price or quantity that is being produced, what is the price or quantity that is being demanded. In the market, both demand and supply exist together. There will be demand, there will be supply, and as you know, there will be some equilibrium price. But let's arrive at this, step by step arrive करते हैं कि क्या ये है और most importantly क्या ये चीज़ है, arrive करते हैं इस चीज़ पे. Market. What do you understand by the term market? I've been using this term in this entire class. You have all used this term several times. Market word से क्या समझते हो? What do you mean by the word market? A place where exchange takes place? Market is not exactly a place actually. Market is not some geographical place. Market is an instance where there exists a demander and a supplier of a good. A demander and supplier interacting, that interaction is market, that instance is market. Now for convenience purposes, most suppliers will be available at a particular place. Let's say Gafar market, Karol Bagh market. As a result, you call this geographical area as a market. But what exactly is a market? Market is that instance where there is any kind of demander and supplier interacting. That instance is the market. What happens in that instance? What happens in that market? The exchange of goods for a value is actually not what happens in the market. It is simply the consequence of what is happening in the market. मार्केट में अल्टीमेटली तो आप पैसा दोगे और आपको गुड मिल जाएगा, लेकिन वो लास्ट एस्पेक्ट है, कॉन्सिक्वेंस है जो मार्केट में हो रहा है. मार्केट में हो क्या रहा है? मार्केट के अंदर हो रहा है एक्सचेंज ऑफ एक्सपेक्टेशंस. There are two entities that are exchanging their expectations with each other and are hoping that the other party will be able to satisfy their expectation. That exchange of expectations with this hope, this is what market is. And if both parties are able to satisfy each other, in that case, ultimately an exchange will take place. Someone will give money, other one is going to get goods. This is the consequence of what is happening in the market. Let's imagine, thought experiment, let's visualize. There is some item for which there are potential producers, potential consumers. अभी केवल willingness की बात कर रहे हैं, ability की बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. There is some item, there are people who want to consume that item, there are people who want to produce that item, willingness. Now, as of this moment, they have not produced or they have not started production. As of this moment, they are not demanding. मतलब हम ability की बात अभी नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम केवल अभी willingness की बात कर रहे हैं. Produce करना चाहते हैं और consume करना चाहते हैं. There is a, let's say, geographical place. There are barriers right now. दोनों साइड फाटक लगा हुआ है, फाटक खुला और अब consumers इधर से, producers इधर से enter करे हैं. Now, what is going to happen in this place? Random interactions will take place. Randomly, a consumer is going to bump into some producer and they are going to exchange their expectations. Consumer has come to the market thinking with some budget. Consumer has come to the market thinking that this is the maximum that I'm going to pay for this good. Based on whatever your budget was, whatever your desire was, आप market में आए ये सोच के कि maximum में इतना देने वाला हूँ. Similarly, producer has come to the market that if I produce this item, I am going to charge at least this much for this good. I will have some cost of production. I want some profit over that. I'm going to charge at least this much for this particular good. Producers come with their own expectations, consumers with their own expectation, and they randomly bump into each other. And what happens in that bumping is both of them exchange their expectation. You came to the market thinking that you are willing to pay maximum 300 rupees for this good. You went to a producer said that I am willing to charge a minimum of 800 rupees for this good. Can you satisfy each other's expectation? आप minimum 800 charge करना चाहते हो, आप minimum maximum 300 pay करना चाहते हो. Consumers and producers, they can't meet each other's expectation. As a result, what happens? Moving on to the next one. As a producer, you go to the next potential consumer. As a consumer, you go to the next potential producer. Let's take from the consumer's point of view. Consumer, he meets the first producer who was willing to charge 800 rupees. What is happening to the consumer now? डिमांड तो सेटिस्फाई नहीं हो पाई कंज्यूमर की. ये आए थे मार्केट मैक्सिमम 300 रुपए पे करने के लिए. इनको प्रोड्यूसर मिला जिसने बोला कि मैं मिनिमम 800 रुपए चार्ज करने वाली हूं. दैट मीन्स दे बोथ कांट इंटरैक्ट विद ईच अदर. व्हाट हैपेंस टू द कंज्यूमर नाउ? पहले कंज्यूमर को सोचना है, फिर प्रोड्यूसर को सोचना है. कंज्यूमर को अब क्या होगा? कंज्यूमर नाउ हैज टू ऑप्शंस. Consumer will go to other producers also, but now consumer will have two options: either to revise his expectations upwards or to drop out of the market. He went to the second one was charging 900 rupees. He went to the third one was charging 700 rupees. He went to the fourth one, he was charging 600 rupees. He has interacted with 4 or 5 producers. Each of them are willing to charge a price much higher than the maximum that he was willing to pay. Now what he's going to do, he's probably going to revise his demand side, his price upward. Or if his budget doesn't allow, he's going to drop out of the market. His willingness is not getting converted into ability. If it does not, he's now going to drop out of the market. If he revises his expectation upwards, the next one that he meets, इसको लगा कि अब तो यार 600 रुपए में कोई मिल जाए, मैं तुरंत खरीद लूंगा इस चीज को. And now he is going to other people who are asking for 600 rupees, trying to find out if he finds somebody is willing to sell the good at 600 rupees, then he is satisfied, then he will purchase that good. तब एक interaction हो जाएगा 600 रुपए के ऊपर. Point is that there are consumers and there are producers, and they randomly bump into each other and exchange their expectation. A consumer's expectations is based on, most importantly, his budget affordability. His desire, how interesting is he to buy that particular good. Similarly, producer expectation is based on what costs are they incurring and how much profit do they seek for this particular good. Think the same thing from producer's perspective now. A producer came to the market thinking that she is going to sell the good for 900 rupees. She came across the first consumer, willing to pay 300, second one 400, third one 500. Now she assesses that it is not for me to produce this good. क्योंकि मेरी cost ही 700 रुपए की है, मैं इसमें 100 रुपए profit भी नहीं कमाऊंगी, तो फिर कैसे बेच सकती हूँ इस चीज को? So she has come across consumers, she has assessed their demand, and now she assesses it is not worth for me to produce this good. Either reduce your cost of production, come back to the market again, or simply drop out of the market. Willingness is not getting converted into ability. So understand what this place market is. Market is a place of exchange of expectations and, listen to the word carefully, rationalization of expectations. Expectations get rationalized. At the time of coming to the market, your expectations are based on only information available in your mind. You did not have any idea about what are other consumers willing to pay, what are producers willing to charge. You simply came to the market with simply your own thinking. Now when you interact with others in the market, now you get to know about their expectations. Your expectations are getting rationalized in this process. Your expectation getting rationalized in this process. Why? Because now you know about other producers, other consumers. Hence, now you become a more rational person. So market is that place of rationalization of expectation. Why? Because now you are interacting, now you have much more information as compared to when you came to the market. This is the place what market is. How does the market operate? There will be many random interactions that take place. Maybe you came to the market thinking that I am willing to pay maximum 200 rupees. And just by luck, you met a producer who was willing to charge 200 rupees only. तो आप 200 रुपए देना चाहते थे, कोई 200 रुपए चार्ज करना चाहते थे, आप दोनों का इंटरेक्शन हो जाएगा. 200 रुपए हो गया एक रैंडम प्राइस. मार्केट में एक प्राइस होगा या मल्टीपल प्राइसेस होंगे सेम गुड के? Multiple prices. Why? Because it is simply random interaction between people. You came to the market thinking that I am willing to pay 1000 rupees and you got somebody who is willing to charge 800 rupees. That means interaction take place between, let's say, a negotiated price of 900 rupees. 900 रुपए के ऊपर भी interaction हुआ है. तो मार्केट में सेम गुड कोई 200 रुपए का बिक रहा है, कोई 900 का बिक रहा है, कोई 600 का बिक रहा है. मार्केट में कई सारे प्राइसेस एग्जिस्ट कर रहे हैं इनिशियली. But amongst those prices, one price becomes a dominant price. One random price becomes a dominant price. What does this dominant term mean? Dominant simply means that price, उस प्राइस के बारे में अब ज्यादातर लोगों को लगता है, काफी लोगों को लगता है कि शायद इसी प्राइस के ऊपर हमको गुड मिलेगा. You were able to carry out your interaction at exchange at 900 rupees. As a result, इस प्रोड्यूसर की एक्सपेक्टेशन को क्या हुआ कि अब मैं अपना गुड 900 रुपए के ऊपर बेच सकती हूं. ये जब बाहर जा रही थी, इन्होंने और 4 कंज्यूमर्स को बताया कि भाई मेरे को तो 900 रुपए के अंदर मिला है, 900 रुपए का ये गुड है. A dominant price, an initial dominant price, meaning producers start to think that they can sell their good at 900 rupees. Consumers start to think that they will have to pay 900 rupees to get this good. So amongst all the initial prices, random prices, some one of them, any one of them can become a dominant price initially. अभी initial ये stage 1 है market की. One price, some randomly chosen price becomes a dominant price. This was my demand, this was my supply. Let's say this is my initially dominant price. मान लेते हैं 900 rupees मेरा initial price है, dominant price है market के अंदर. At 900 rupees, this is my demand, ये मेरी quantity demanded है. At 900 rupees, this is my quantity supplied. ये supply curve है, यहाँ इतनी मेरी supply quantity है, ये मेरी demand quantity है. 900 रुपए के ऊपर इसको विजुलाइज करके एक्सप्लेन करना है, एज एन इंट्यूटिवली, ग्राफ में नहीं, इंट्यूटिवली एक्सप्लेन करना है. 900 रुपीज अगर प्राइस है, ध्यान से सुना सवाल को. इफ लेट्स से consumers know that 900 rupees is the price that they are going to have to pay to get this good in the market. Tell me who are all the consumers that are left in the market. अगर 900 रुपए मार्केट में प्राइस पे करना है तो बताओ मार्केट में कौन कौन कंज्यूमर बचेगा? Anyone who came to the market with a willingness to pay a price of 900 or more. जो भी मार्केट में 900 या 900 से ऊपर देने के लिए आया था, केवल वही लोग मार्केट में बचेंगे. Everybody else is out. So these people who are willing to pay a price of 900 or more, this quantity of people are the ones who are left in the market. This is what my demand is. People willing to pay a price 900 or more. Demand comes from people willing to pay 900 or a higher price. What about suppliers? Who are all the suppliers left in the market when they get to know that the price is 900 rupees? कौन suppliers बचेंगे market में? Who are all the suppliers of the good who will be left in the market if they get to know that the price is 900 rupees? कौन कौन suppliers बचेंगे? Anybody who was capable to sell their good at a price 900 or less. आपकी कॉस्ट 200 रुपए थी, अगर मार्केट 900 दे रही तो आप क्यों नहीं मार्केट में होगे? ऑब्वियसली आप मार्केट के अंदर होगे. लेकिन अगर आपकी कॉस्ट 1100 रुपए थी, देन एंड यू नो दैट द मार्केट इज गोइंग टू गिव 900, यू आर नो लॉन्गर देयर इन द मार्केट. सो हु आर ऑल द सप्लायर्स इन द मार्केट? एनीबडी हु कैन सेल देयर गुड एट अ प्राइस 900 और लेस. दीज आर द सप्लायर्स वर्सेस दीज आर द डिमांडर्स हियर. इज दिस एब्सोल्युटली क्लियर टू एवरीबडी? डिमांडर कौन है, सप्लायर कौन है? So at any price, any given price, कोई भी प्राइस है, 900 है, 500 है, जो भी प्राइस है, at any price, demand comes from those people who are willing to pay a price, that price or more. People willing to pay that much price or more, केवल वही लोग मार्केट में रह जाएंगे. Market allows them to purchase the good at 900. I was willing to pay 1000. Why would I pay 1000? जब मार्केट में को 900 में बेच रही है तो मैं 900 में तो खरीदूंगा ना. लेकिन अब मैं 1000 दे सकता था. That means anyone willing to pay 900 or more is there in the market. But someone who was willing to pay 700 वो market में अब नहीं है क्योंकि उसको 900 रुपए देने पड़ेंगे. Opposite case with respect to supply, anybody willing to sell their good at a price 900 or less is the one who is going to remain in the market. Now let's say there is an initial dominant price 900 rupees at which this is what my demand is and this is what my supply is. Supply is more than demand. ये डिमांड है इतनी क्वांटिटी और इतनी क्वांटिटी सप्लाइड है. दैट मीन देयर इज अ केस ऑफ एक्सेस सप्लाई और नॉट. देयर इज एक्सेस सप्लाई, देयर इज मोर सप्लाई. सप्लाई इज मोर एज कंपेयर टू डिमांड. अगेन, हु आर ऑल द सप्लायर्स इन द मार्केट? बोलो सप्लायर्स कौन कौन है? एनीबडी हु इज एबल एंड विलिंग टू सेल देयर गुड एट अ प्राइस 900 और लेस. दीज आर द सप्लायर्स. मार्केट में ऐसे लोग भी हैं जो कि अपना गुड 800 पर बेच सकते थे, 700 पर बेच सकते थे, 200 पर बेच सकते थे. बट मार्केट अलाउड देम, द मार्केट गेव देम अ सिग्नल दैट यू कैन सेल योर गुड एट 900, देयरफॉर ऑल ऑफ देम आर सेलिंग देयर गुड एट 900. बट द पॉइंट इज दैट देयर इज एक्सेस सप्लाई इन द मार्केट. द डिमांड इज लेस, सप्लाई इज मोर, मीनिंग देयर आर सप्लायर्स, one who can sell their good at a price of less than 900, can sell. And some of these suppliers may be left with an unsold supply. One, there are people who can sell their good at a price 900 or less. ऐसे लोग हैं जो कि 800, 700, 600, 300 पर गुड बेच सकते हैं. और ऐसे लोगों को फियर भी है. They also have a fear that we might be the one left with unsold supply. That means, what will these people now do? The people who can sell their good at a price less than 900 and are also fearful that they might be the one left with unsold supply in the market. What will such people do? They will now put a downward pressure on price. As a consumer, when you go, आपको थोड़ी ना पता है कि प्रोड्यूसर की प्रोड्यूस की कॉस्ट कितनी है. आप तो प्रोड्यूसर को बोल रहे हो कि भाई there's a good and the price is 900, you sell me this good. You don't know how much profit is he making on this good. His cost might have been 850, his cost might have been 250. You simply want the good at 900. बट जिसकी कॉस्ट 200, 300, 400 रुपए थी, उसको लग रहा है कि मेरे गुड सेल नहीं होंगे, तो अब ये पर्सन डिस्काउंट देना स्टार्ट करेगा. विल नाउ बी पुटिंग अ डाउनवर्ड प्रेशर ऑन प्राइस. व्हेन ही पुट्स अ डाउनवर्ड प्रेशर ऑन प्राइस, प्राइस अभी एडजस्ट नहीं होगा. प्रोड्यूसर्स आर नॉट प्राइस सेटर्स. He is not going to set the price, but he now starts to sell the good at a lower price. When he starts to sell the good at a lower price, what happens is word circulates in the market. Market is a place of rationalization of expectations. Information spreads in the market amongst other producers that there are some who are putting a downward pressure. Information spreads amongst other consumers that you can get this good at a lower price. As a result of this new information available to producers and consumers, now the price adjusts downwards. अब price पे downward pressure, price अब नीचे की तरफ जाएगा. Let's say price goes to 800 rupees, this value. New price in the market, new dominant price in the market becomes 800 rupees. At 800, who are all the demanders? Anybody who is willing to pay 800 or more. डिमांड बढ़ गई है पहले से, पहले इतने लोग डिमांड कर रहे थे, अब इतने लोग डिमांड कर रहे हैं. But what about supply? Because 800 now becomes the new dominant price, therefore some of the producers have now exited the market. Those who could produce at 900 versus those who could produce at 800 only. कुछ suppliers कम हो गए market से. Supply has now reduced, demand has now increased. But still you see that supply is more than demand. अभी भी market में कुछ unsold supply है. That means same process will operate now. Again, at 800, there are producers who can sell their good at a price of 800 or less and are also fearful that they might not be able to sell this supply. They fear that they might be the ones who are left with this unsold supply. That means these people are going to put a downward pressure again until the price adjusts to this level. मान लो ये हमारा इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस है, ये 600 रुपीज है. 600 रुपीज के ऊपर डिमांडर कौन कौन है मार्केट में? एनीबडी हु इज विलिंग टू पे प्राइस 600 और मोर. सप्लायर कौन कौन है? एनीबडी हु इज विलिंग टू चार्ज अ प्राइस 600 और लेस. तो सप्लाई इज कमिंग फ्रॉम पीपल हु आर विलिंग टू चार्ज 600 और लेस. डिमांड कमिंग फ्रॉम पीपल हु आर विलिंग टू पे 600 और मोर. डिमांड एंड सप्लाई की क्वांटिटी बराबर है. द ग्राफ्स आर इंटरसेक्टिंग हियर. दिस इज द क्वांटिटी डिमांडेड, दिस इज द सेम द क्वांटिटी दैट इज बीइंग सप्लाइड हियर. मीनिंग, इज देयर एनी अनसोल्ड सप्लाई इन द मार्केट? कोई अनसोल्ड सप्लाई नहीं है. इतनी ही क्वांटिटी डिमांड कर्व के ऊपर इतनी ही क्वांटिटी डिमांड हो रही है, सप्लाई के ऊपर इतनी क्वांटिटी सप्लाई हो रही है, प्रोड्यूस हो रही है. सो द क्वांटिटी डिमांडेड एंड क्वांटिटी सप्लाइड इज सेम. अगेन, at 600 there are people demanding who are willing to pay price 600 or more. Suppliers, there are people who are willing to sell their good, who are able to, no sorry, people who are able to sell their good at a price 600 or less. 600 रुपए के ऊपर वो वाले प्रोड्यूसर्स भी हैं मार्केट में जो कि अपना गुड 400 में बेच सकते हैं. लेकिन जो 400 में बेच सकते हैं, क्या इनकी कोई अनसोल्ड सप्लाई है? Is there any unsold supply at this point? There is no unsold supply. Even though there are producers who can sell their good at a price lower than 600, because now there is no unsold supply, would anybody be putting a downward pressure on price? ये बात क्लियर होनी चाहिए सबको. I'll repeat. At 600 rupees, suppliers कौन से हैं? At 600 rupees, suppliers are all those people who can sell their goods at a price of 600 or less. There are people at 600 rupees of market price who can sell their good at 200 rupees. 200 रुपए में बेच सकता हूं. मेरी कॉस्ट 150 रुपए की थी, मैं 200 रुपए में बेच सकता हूं. लेकिन जब मेरी कोई अनसोल्ड सप्लाई है ही नहीं, when I don't have any unsold supply, why would I put a downward pressure on price? That means at this point there is no downward pressure now. Despite people who can sell their goods at lower price, there is no downward pressure on price at this point. Is this clear? You can start from a randomly chosen dominant price below as well. हमने 900 randomly chosen price था. You can start a price here also, let's say 200 rupees. At 200 rupees, who are all the suppliers? केवल इतनी सप्लाई है मार्केट के अंदर. Who are all the demanders? Because the price is only 200 rupees, many people get to know that you can get this good only for 200 rupees. Meaning demand is quite high as compared to supply. When demand is high as compared to supply, that means now we have an unmet demand in the market. 200 रुपए के ऊपर demanders कौन है? Anybody who can pay a price of 200 or more are the demanders. Meaning someone who came to the market thinking that I will pay 1000 rupees, that person is there in the market. Somebody who came with thinking 300, that is there in the market. Somebody who came with the thinking that I will pay 200, that is there, he is there in the market. तो 200 रुपए के ऊपर ये सारे के सारे डिमांडर्स मार्केट के अंदर अवेलेबल हैं. लेकिन सप्लाई केवल इनकी है जो कि अपना गुड को 200 से कम में सेल कर सकते थे. Suppliers are only those people who can sell their good at a price 200 or less. Demand and supply. There is a huge unmet demand. As a result of that, as a consumer, what are you going to do? You're going to put an upward pressure. You will go to a shop and say that I will pay you 20, 30, 100 rupees premium, lekin I want this good. Some consumers who are able to pay a price 200 or more will now put an upward pressure. Why? Because they fear that they will have an unmet demand. इन्हीं की डिमांड फुलफिल नहीं होगी. मैं तो 500 रुपए देना चाहता था, मेरी डिमांड फुलफिल नहीं हो रही है, मार्केट में 200 वाले की फुलफिल हो जा रही है. I am willing to pay a premium. I am going to put an upward pressure. As a result, what happens? Again, word circulates in the market. Producers get to know that there are people who are willing to pay a higher price. As a result, supply will increase. Consumers get to know that now they can no longer get this good at 200 rupees. They will have to pay more price than 200 rupees. As a result, demand will decrease. Therefore, this becomes my new price. Again, demand is more, supply is less. That is again a case of unmet demand. Therefore, again, there is an upward pressure. Till what point will this upward pressure operate? Till this point. Again, let's approach this point from below this time. इस point के ऊपर again, price 600 रुपए, 600 rupees price है. Who are all the demanders here? People willing to pay 600 or more. ये हमारे demanders हैं. At this point, 600 rupees, let's look from demand point of view. At this point, again, demand is equal to supply, QS is equal to QD at this point. There is no unmet demand here. 600 रुपए के ऊपर कोई unmet demand नहीं है. At 600 rupees, even though there are people willing to pay more price than 600 rupees, but because there is no unmet demand at 600, as demand is equal to supply, nobody would be putting an upward pressure at this point. Therefore, at this point, what do you see? That there is neither an upward pressure nor a downward pressure. हेंस इक्विलिब्रियम, इसीलिए बोलते हैं इस प्राइस को इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस है। सबको क्लियर हो गया क्या है इक्विलिब्रियम? हाउ डज मार्केट ऑपरेट? वी कॉल दिस इक्विलिब्रियम प्राइस एज कंडीशन ऑफ मार्केट क्लियरेंस। Market clears itself, market clearance. Anybody who came to the market, इसको देखो, anybody who came to the market with their supply at 600, उसकी supply sell हो गई है नहीं हुई है? Because supply is equal to demand. Anybody who came to the market with a demand willing to pay 600, उसकी demand meet हो गई कि नहीं हो गई है? All the demands have been met, all the supplies have been sold. There is nobody in the market who is left unsatisfied. Everybody who came to the market with the demand has been fulfilled. With the supply has been sold. Neither there is an unmet demand nor there is an unmet supply. The market clears itself. We call this condition as condition of market clearance. Clear है? सबको आगे समझ में? This is what happens in the market. One last thing before we write. डिमांड एंड सप्लाई हमने प्लॉट किया और वहां से हम मार्केट प्राइस के ऊपर निकल के लेकर आए। जो डिमांड कर्व प्लॉट किया था, सप्लाई कर्व प्लॉट किया था, ये कांस्टेंट कंडीशंस में था या फिर वेरिंग कंडीशंस में था? कांस्टेंट कंडीशन में। आर दोज अंडरलाइंग कंडीशंस अज्यूम टू बी कांस्टेंट और आर दे कांस्टेंट? They are assumed, meaning the demand will keep on moving here and there, supply will keep on moving here and there. That means, do you have a constant equilibrium here? No. Demand will keep on fluctuating, supply will keep on fluctuating, meaning other factors will keep on changing. इसीलिए मार्केट में, रियलिटी में हम कभी भी एक प्राइस नहीं देखेंगे। मार्केट में प्राइस विल कीप ऑन मूविंग अप एंड डाउन, but yes, it will always have a tendency to go at that equilibrium price. Demand will keep on fluctuating ऊपर नीचे, supply ऊपर नीचे, as in they will keep on shifting because of other factors changing. But there will always be a tendency, as in temporarily you can see that there is some excess supply, excess demand, and hence price will increase, decrease, whatever. But yes, there is always a tendency for the price to move towards this equilibrium value. This is equilibrium price, the condition of market clearance. Clear to everyone? सबको आ गया समझ में? देखो, कौन सा इसे चलाना है भाई? और यहां पे क्यों लिखते हो यार इसे चलाने के लिए? AC नंबर 10 एट द बैक, कौन सा है? ये वाला है? यार बोल देना श्री, ये सब चीजें मत किया करो यहाँ पे, चिट चैटिंग की जगह नहीं है। लिखो मार्केट, राइट डाउन। A market is a place, a market is a place of exchange of expectations, of exchange of expectations. Exchange of expectations, full stop. Potential producers and consumers, potential producers and consumers meet and carry out exchanges of information. Potential consumers and producers meet and carry out exchanges of information regarding their willingness to pay or charge, comma, with the hope of finding someone who can satisfy their expectations. With the hope of finding someone who can satisfy their expectations. इसको पर्सनल लाइफ में इंप्लीमेंट मत करने लग जाना। फुल स्टॉप, आगे लिखो। A transaction is possible only if a transaction is possible only if both parties cross satisfy each other. नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ में initially information about initially information with each individual is limited. Initially information with each individual is limited, comma, hence their expectations are severely bound to individual knowledge. Full stop. As such they are less rational. Full stop. Hence initial exchanges take place. At random. Initial exchanges take place at random, comma, varying prices. Next line में, as information spreads, comma, expectations get rationalized, comma, and prices start converging to a equilibrium value. ग्राफ बना लेते हैं पहले. पूरी विड्थ में ग्राफ बनाना है, एज इन पूरी पेज की विड्थ में. विल राइट समथिंग हियर और इस साइड में ग्राफ बनाएंगे. सप्लाई डिमांड QS QD मार्क कर लेना, एरोज लगा देना डाउनवर्ड एंड अपवर्ड के. P0 P1 P2 QS greater than QD, excess supply therefore downward pressure, QS equal to QD, equilibrium, QS less than QD, unmet demand, therefore upward pressure. Done? Go. Write down. At any given price P, at any given price P, price comma P, comma, the demand bracket में QD, the demand bracket में QD comes from people willing to pay, comes from people willing to pay a price P or more, P or more. Next line में लिखना, similarly, comma, the supply at this price P, similarly, the supply at this price P comes from anyone willing to sell, anyone willing to sell, and anyone, I'm so sorry, anyone able to sell, not willing, anyone able to sell. Why would I be willing to sell at a lower price? Anyone able to sell at a price, anyone able to sell at a price P or less, at a price P or less. अब next paragraph में लिखो, suppose P1, suppose P1 ब्रैकेट में ग्रेटर देन P0, हमने P1 को P0 से बड़ा बताया ना, सपोज P1 ब्रैकेट में ग्रेटर देन P0, P1 ब्रैकेट में ग्रेटर देन P0 ब्रैकेट क्लोज, becomes an initial dominant price, an initial dominant price, ब्रैकेट में लिख लो randomly chosen, P1 greater than P0 becomes a initial dominant price randomly chosen, bracket close, full stop. At this price there is excess supply, ब्रैकेट में लिखो QS greater than QD, QS greater than QD. At this price there is excess supply, QS greater than QD, bracket close, full stop. Full stop. There are suppliers who can sell their produce, there are suppliers who can sell their produce at a price less than P1, at a price less than P1. So because of a fear of unsold supply, because of a fear of unsold supply, comma, such producers would exert a downward pressure on prices. Such producers would exert a downward pressure on prices. First up, as word spreads, comma, more consumers enter. Word, W-O-R-D, word of mouth. As word spreads, comma, more consumers would enter. Bracket में QD increases. Bracket close, comma, and some suppliers start exiting. Bracket में QS falls. This downward pressure, comma, and corresponding readjustment of price. This downward pressure, comma, and corresponding readjustment of price would take place until QS becomes equal to QD. Comma, that is at P0. What's up? Next line में देखना. At this price, bracket में P0, at this price P0, comma, even though there are producers at this price P0, even though there are producers who can sell at a lower price. Comma, they would not put any downward pressure. As there is no fear of unsold supply. Next paragraph में, similar adjustment can be seen if we begin from the price P2, bracket में less than P0. If we begin from the price P2, bracket में less than P0, comma, as in bracket close, comma, where demand exceeds supply, dash, people, dash लगाओ, dash, people willing to pay a higher price would be fearful that their demands may not be met. People willing to pay a higher price would be fearful that their demands may not be met, comma, and hence would put an upward pressure. It would continue it would continue till there is no unmet demand. It would continue till there is no unmet demand. That is, QD becomes equal to QS. That is, QD becomes equal to QS. That is at P0. That is at P0. Next paragraph में P0, comma, is therefore, P0 is therefore the equilibrium price, is therefore the equilibrium price. That is, there is neither, that is, there is neither an unsold supply, there is neither an unsold supply nor an unmet demand, nor an unmet demand, comma, despite there being producers who can sell at a lower price, despite there being producers who can sell at a lower price, comma, and consumers who can pay higher. Consumers who can pay higher. Last paragraph लिखना है. This condition is known as market clearance. This condition is known as market clearance. Market clearance underline कर लेना, market clearance को dash. The market clears itself. The market clears itself. That is, anyone who came to the market, goes back satisfied. ठीक है, सबको क्लियर है मार्केट कैसे ऑपरेट करती है? डिमांड, सप्लाई एंड मार्केट सबको क्लियर हो गया है? बिल्कुल फाइन. ब्रेक लेना है? चलो ब्रेक ले लेते हैं. ब्रेक में इफ यू विश यू कैन रीड व्हाट वी हैव जस्ट रिटन. मार्केट वाला पार्ट आई एम श्योर समझ में आ गया होगा, अपवर्ड प्रेशर डाउनवर्ड प्रेशर वाला पोर्शन, बट इफ यू विश यू कैन रीड इट. बट सप्लाई वाला पार्ट एक बार पढ़ लेना और क्लैरिटी हो जाएगी उसके अंदर. ठीक है, अब ब्रेक के बाद वील स्टार्ट विद अवर क्लासिकल. विल नाउ रिटर्न, जो हमने पॉज किया था क्लासिकल और वेज रेट, अब हम उसको समझेंगे. ठीक है, चलो. गिव हेडिंग क्लासिकल और वेज रेट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. मेरे ख्याल से 5th या 6th होगी हमारी. 6th जो भी नंबरिंग है यार, 6 तो नीचे मेरे ख्याल से. अरे जोन सी भी नंबरिंग है यार, जो लिख लो. हेडिंग दे दो भाई, बिना नंबरिंग के हेडिंग दे दो. क्लासिकल स्लैश वेज रेट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. क्लासिकल स्लैश वेज रेट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. ऑल राइट, इधर देखो. डिमांड क्लियर है सबको? क्वांटिटी डिमांडेड, लॉ ऑफ डिमांड. सप्लाई, quantity supplied, law of supply, and what happens in the market, है ना? Market is a place of rationalization of expectations. People exchange expectations, and eventually through those exchanges we move towards a rational price, an equilibrium price, right? All right, classical or wage rate unemployment. कार्स की मार्केट है हमारे पास. डिमांड ऑफ कार्स, सप्लाई ऑफ कार्स, and an eventual equilibrium price of cars, right? Who are the demanders of car? We are the consumers, we are the demander of cars. Who are the suppliers of car? The producers, Honda, Hyundai, Maruti, all these are example of producers of car, right? Okay. There is a market in which we are the producers. What is that market? What is that we are producing? जो कि हम ट्रेडिशनल सेंस में कंज्यूमर्स हैं, एक मार्केट में हम प्रोड्यूसर्स हैं. Labor market. There exists a market for various goods and services, including a market for labor. There are demanders of labor and there are suppliers of labor. Who are the demanders of labor? Labor कौन डिमांड कर रहा है? जो कन्वेंशनल सेंस में प्रोड्यूसर्स हैं, ये लेबर मार्केट में डिमांडर बन जाते हैं. दे आर द वंस दैट डिमांड लेबर. हु आर द सप्लायर्स ऑफ लेबर? People themselves, people who are able and willing to supply their labor, ability, willingness. People who are able and willing to work, that is supply their labor, they become suppliers of labor. उसको क्या बोलते हैं? People who are able and willing to work, क्या बोलते हैं उसको? लेबर फोर्स. सो सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर क्या है? बेसिकली एक कंट्री की लेबर फोर्स जो है वो सप्लायर ऑफ लेबर है. डिमांडर्स ऑफ लेबर कौन है? जो फर्म्स हैं कन्वेंशनल सेंस में, ये डिमांडर ऑफ लेबर है. Demand of a good depends upon various factors, including the price of the good and many other factors. Supply of the good depends upon various factors, including the price of the good. What is price of labor? Labor के price को क्या बोलेंगे? Wages. So price of labor, price is wages. First, let's look at demand of labor. There are firms, Visionis, let's say is firm, Honda, Hyundai, Maruti, Amul, all these are example of firms. Firms demand labor, demanders of labor. What will demand of labor depend upon? Among other factors, it will depend upon wages or not? Wages factors. There will be many factors that will determine demand of labor. Visionis कितने workers demand कर रहा है, कई सारे factors पे depend करेगा. And one of those factors would be wages. Law of demand, assuming other factors as constant. What does demand of workers, demand of labor in a firm depends upon, or in all the firms depend upon? Inversely or directly on wages. कितनी लेबर टोटल फर्म कंट्री की डिमांड कर रही हैं, ये वेजेस के ऊपर डायरेक्टली डिपेंड करेगा, इनडायरेक्टली डिपेंड करेगा. डिमांड ऑफ लेबर वेरीज इनवर्सली विद वेजेस. क्या विजुलाइज कर सकते हो? इफ वेजेस आर हाई, विल फर्म्स डिमांड मोर वर्कर्स और लेस वर्कर्स? इफ वेजेस आर लो, द डिमांड ऑफ वर्कर्स वुड बी हायर. Comparatively speaking, as in relatively speaking, when the wages are on the lower side, the demand of workers is going to be higher. Assuming other factors as constant, other factors की हम यहाँ पे बात नहीं, उनको हमने constant मानना नहीं है. Assuming others as constant, we have many factors that will determine how many workers are employed in an economy. The firms are demanding an economy. Assuming other factors except wages as constant, we can say that DL is inversely proportional to wages. Assuming other factors as constant. Supply. There will be many factors that will determine how many people are able and willing to produce the service, which is labor service. कि country की labor force कितनी है? What is the size of country's labor force? The quantity supplied. The size of country's labor force, again, it will depend upon many factors. Are you in labor force? You are not. हमने discuss किया था ना? Are you able to work? Are you willing to work? Right now, no, as in your willingness is not expressed in some verifiable form. So therefore, even though you are able to work, you are not considered as part of labor force, क्योंकि आपकी willingness नहीं है work करने की. याद आ रहा है डिस्कशन किया था हमने. सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर कहाँ से आ रहा है? कंट्री की लेबर फोर्स से. कंट्री की लेबर फोर्स जो है वो है सप्लायर्स ऑफ वर्कर्स. याद आ रहा है ना? किसी को प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं है इसके अंदर? Supply of any good, supply of cars, people who are or producers who are able and willing to produce cars. Supply of ice cream, people who are able and willing to supply, as in produce ice cream. Supply of labor, people who are able and willing to produce labor services. हो गई हमारी supply of labor. Who are the people who are able and willing to produce labor services? It is the labor force of the country. The quantity labor force मेरे country की इतनी है, ये लोग हैं, इतनी मेरी labor की supply है country के अंदर. अब क्वेश्चन ये है कि लेबर फोर्स, दैट इज सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर, हाउ विल दिस डिपेंड अपॉन वेजेस? the size of a country's labor force. Let us say this entire class is my country. These are the dependent population, these are the able, that is working age population. तो ये लोग लेबर फोर्स के बाहर हो गए, ये तो हो गए हमारे एज एन डिपेंडेंट्स. ये लोग कौन हो गए? पीपल हु आर इन द वर्किंग एज. And this section of class, these are not willing to work. Able but not willing. Only this section is able as well as willing. So this section, middle section, this becomes my labor force or not? Supply of labor, the quantity of labor supplied, the labor force size of the country is this middle section. The question is, how will the size of this section depend upon wages? Wages से कैसे influence होगा? Is size of how many people are able and willing to work. How will supply of labor be dependent upon wages? Directly, indirectly, or what will be the relationship? आंसर तुमको पता ही है, डायरेक्टली है. हमने लिखना तो यही है कि SL is indirectly proportional to wages, लेकिन एक्सप्लेन करना पड़ेगा कि कैसे. How is supply of labor directly proportional to wages? If wages are high, these were the people who are part of, ये तो लेबर फोर्स का पार्टी, एज ये तो एबल वाली पॉपुलेशन का पार्टी नहीं है, तो डिपेंडेंट्स हैं. लेकिन ये वाले जो लोग जो हैं, these are the people who are able to work but not yet willing to work. They come to prepare for civil services. But these people decide to go out and explore jobs in private sector. They express, we are willing to work. You look at your friends who are not preparing for civil services, who are in private sector, you look at your friends and you see that they are earning very high wages. You will also want to earn those high wages because your friends are earning those high wages. How will you be able to earn those high wages? Wages earn करने के लिए employment करना जाना पड़ेगा. Employment में आने के लिए पहले labor force में आना पड़ेगा, तभी तो employment में जाओगे. So if wages are high, what happens to the, if this word is clear to you, opportunity cost word समझते हो? There is a cost of sitting out. If you sit out of labor force, you will never be able to get the higher wages that the employed people in labor force are getting. Now, whether you are going to get those wages or not, वो तो depend करेगा आपके पास skills कितने, आप job को ले सकते हो कि नहीं ले सकते हो. लेकिन पहले, first to get those higher wages, you will have to first express your willingness and become part of labor force. So if wages are high, it becomes costly to sit out. Higher wages will lead to more number of these people joining this section. The labor force will increase. When wages increase, supply of workers also increase. Higher wages means a greater size of labor force, that is greater supply of labor. So we have our demand law and supply law as we have discussed earlier. Demand of labor is inversely proportional to its wages. Supply of labor is directly proportional to its wages. Assuming other factors that determine demand supply is constant, we have demand law and supply law over here. That means we can look at labor market. Labor market में price क्या है? Wages, price of labor, and you have quantity of labor. You have demand of labor and supply of labor. Demand inversely proportional to wages. Higher the wages, lower will be the demand. Lower the wages, higher will be the demand. Similarly, supply, lower the wages, less number of people are able and willing to work. More the wages, more people will be in labor force. That means supply directly proportional to W. So we have demand and supply of workers. This is my labor market. Labor market may, like any other market, there might be some initial random price. Let's say W1, which is greater than W0. W0 becomes our equilibrium price. W1 becomes our, let's say, current random price. कुछ भी price हो, W1 हो, W2 हो, eventually the price will move to equilibrium or not. हमने discuss किया है, eventually price, it has a tendency to move towards equilibrium. So price will ultimately move towards equilibrium. At W1, you see here, at W1 there is a greater supply as compared to demand. SL is greater than DL. Supply of labor is more as compared to demand of labor. Wages ज़्यादा है तो firms कम लोगों को employ करना चाहती हैं because of higher wages. But wages ज़्यादा हैं इसलिए ज़्यादा लोग labor force के अंदर आ रहे हैं. Supply of workers is more, demand of workers is less. Because supply of workers is more, demand of workers is less. There will be some workers willing to work at lower wages. You saw that wages are high, तो इसलिए आप लेबर फोर्स का पार्ट हो, लेकिन आप कम दाम पे काम करने के लिए भी तैयार थे. You are willing to work at lower wage. That means people like you who are willing to supply their work, their labor services at lower price, they would put a downward pressure, and as a result of that, eventually wages will adjust to equilibrium or not. Eventually wages equilibrium पे adjust हो जाएंगे. At equilibrium you have DL equals to SL. Demand of labor is equal to supply of labor. There are at W0 exactly this number of jobs. इसको मैं L0 लिख लेता हूँ. There are L0 number of jobs and L0 number of people in the labor force. जब इतना wage है तो W0 wage है तो. At W0, what is the unemployment in the country? W0 के ऊपर unemployment कितना है country के अंदर? 0 है कि नहीं है? जितने वर्कर्स हैं, एज इन जितने लेबर फोर्स में लोग हैं, एग्जैक्टली उतनी ही जॉब्स हैं. देयर आर एसएल नंबर ऑफ जॉब, एसएल नंबर ऑफ पीपल इन द लेबर फोर्स, देयर आर डीएल नंबर ऑफ जॉब्स that the firms are demanding, and because SL is equal to DL, that means there is nobody who's unemployed at W0. So at equilibrium wages in the economy, unemployment rate would be 0 or not? तो equilibrium के ऊपर unemployment rate 0 है. If wages are higher than W0, that is at W1, you have more supply as compared to demand. That means who are these people? Unemployed or not? There is an excess supply over demand, तो ये लोग क्या हो जाएंगे? हमारे unemployed हो जाएंगे. ये बात clear है सबको? At W1 you have excess supply of labor as compared to demand. This excess supply, jobs are only this much, whereas workers, labor force is this much. That means these people will not be able to get job. These are the ones who are unemployed. But if supply is more than demand, there would be a downward pressure on wages. As a result of this downward pressure, wages should eventually adjust to this level. And when they go to this level W0, we'll have a situation of zero unemployment because number of jobs and number of people in the labor force would be same. As a result, there should be zero unemployment. However, if for some reason wages are not allowed to fall downwards, if there is something that prevents wages from falling downwards, wages should adjust downwards. But if somehow they fail to adjust, somehow they do not move downwards, then what would we have? Then we would have a permanent situation in which supply of labor is greater as compared to demand of labor. That means we have unemployment. Unemployment is not there because supply is more than demand, that is wages are more than equilibrium. Wages are more than equilibrium, wages should adjust downwards. Eventually we'll reach that equilibrium state where there will be no unemployment. But if there is something that prevents wages from falling downwards, then there is no adjustment possible. Because there is no adjustment possible, therefore now we have a permanent situation where supply exceeds demand as prices are not allowed to fall downwards. This is a situation of wage rate unemployment, also called as classical unemployment. Wage rate or classical unemployment is when wages exceed equilibrium wage and they are not allowed to, or they fail to adjust downwards, that is towards the equilibrium value. Because they fail to adjust, therefore there is a permanent case of excess supply over demand and hence unemployment. Classical economists, the original economists, they say that there are prominently two reasons here as to why prices, that is wages, will not adjust downwards. दो prominent कारण हैं जिनके कारण wages नीचे adjust नहीं करेंगी. Reason number one, you have a minimum wage law that makes it illegal for firms to hire workers below a certain wage. If minimum wages क्या होती हैं? Legalized wages, legal wage. सरकार ने जो law में तय कर रखा है कि इससे कम किसी को wage नहीं दी जाएगी. If government sets minimum wages which are more than equilibrium wages, then in that case, even though there is a person willing to work at a lower wage, as an employer, it becomes illegal for me to hire you at a lower wage. That means even though I am willing to hire you, you are willing to work, it is illegal, hence the transaction is not possible. Government legislates, government interferes in the labor market, and government legislates minimum wages which are more than equilibrium wages. Therefore, therefore wages fail to adjust downward. Reason number one as to why they will not adjust. Reason number two, you have strong labor unions that negotiate for higher wages. Labor unions किसके इंटरेस्ट्स प्रमोट करती हैं? हाँ, यहां पे वर्ड्स इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाते हैं. Words extremely important. Even though we call them mostly labor unions, they have nothing to do with the interest of labor, as in people in labor force. They promote interest of workers. And the interest of worker versus labor, there is a vast difference between the two. Worker versus labor. जब तक आप लेबर फोर्स में हो, मतलब अनएम्प्लॉयड हो अभी, as long as you are unemployed, you are willing to work under any conditions. बस किसी भी तरीके से जॉब मिल जाए, I am willing to perform all the conditions that are required. As soon as you become a worker, सबसे पहले क्या करना है? जब भी कमरे में घुसो, सबसे पहले पीछे चिटकनी बंद कर दो. पॉलिटिक्स का रूल. टिकट लेने वाले तो बहुत सारे लोग हैं ना, टिकट मिलने वाले अच्छे कैंडिडेट्स तो बड़े सारे होंगे, लेकिन टिकट मिलना तो एक कोई है. तो सबसे पहले अगर आपको बुलाया गया, आपको दरवाजा बंद करना है. You become an employee. Now your objective is to make sure that one, you remain there, and second, you get most wages. You get the maximum benefit of from the employer. That means now what is going to happen is you are going to form a workers union. The worker union is going to negotiate for higher wages with the employer. अब क्योंकि employer है, firm है, उसको काम तो करवाना ही करवाना है, तो employer अब आपको higher wages दे देगा. Employer gives higher wages. What do your friends outside see? They see that workers are getting higher wages. As a result, they are also willing to supply their labor. They enter labor force. But because now I am being forced, the firm is being forced to offer higher wages, what has happened to my capacity to hire new workers? It has reduced. अपने existing workers को I'll keep on giving higher wages because they have formed a strong labor union, so I can't negotiate with them any further. So the union has forced me to give them higher wages. That has resulted in me not being able to give any higher wages or not being able to hire any new person now at this wage. क्योंकि labor union है, strong है, इसकी वजह से now I am no longer capable to offer any higher wage to anybody. I am no longer capable to hire anybody. As a result, people will keep on coming into labor force. Firms will not be able to employ them. Hence, wages will not fall below. There will always be a case of less demand of workers, more supply of workers. As a result, we'll have unemployment. So two prominent reasons because of which wages do not adjust towards equilibrium, and hence causing a permanent situation of excess supply over demand. Number one, higher than equilibrium minimum wages, making it illegal for firms to offer lower wages. Second, strong labor unions that negotiate for again higher than equilibrium wages for the workers. As a result, making it impossible for the firms to offer lower wages to the workers. So these are two prominent reasons as to which wages will not adjust. Hence, we are going to be left with this permanent situation of excess supply over demand. This becomes our classical or wage rate unemployment. ठीक है, क्लियर है? राइट डाउन. क्लासिकल और वेज रेट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट लिखो. इन द लेबर मार्केट, in the labor market, comma, the demanders bracket में firms, in the labor market, comma, the demander bracket में firms, bracket close, comma, in bracket close, firms interact with suppliers, I'll repeat, in the labor market, comma, the demanders bracket में firms interact with suppliers bracket में workers to carry out exchange of labor services, at a price, at a price, bracket में wages, so many factors would influence, many factors would influence the total quantity of labor demanded, the total quantity of labor demanded by the firms, comma, and the total quantity of labor, available for work. नेक्स्ट टाइम लिखो डिमांड ऑफ लेबर ब्रैकेट में DL, डिमांड ऑफ लेबर ब्रैकेट में DL dash assuming other factors except wages, assuming other factors except wages as constant, except wages में wages के बाद comma, wages comma as constant comma, the ability and willingness of demanders bracket में firms, the ability and willingness of demanders bracket में firms would be inversely proportional to wages. नेक्स्ट साइड में ऐसे लिखो DL inversely proportional to W. DL inversely proportional to W, other factors constant. नेक्स्ट लाइन में लिखो सप्लाई ऑफ लेबर, लिखो assuming other factors comma except wages comma assuming other factors comma except wages, उसके बाद फिर से comma as constant except wages as constant comma the ability and willingness of suppliers bracket में labor force bracket close to supply their labor to supply their labor would be directly proportional to wages, SL proportional to W, other factors constant. अब इसके नीचे स्टार मार्क करके लिख लेना, एक ही लाइन लिखनी है, स्टार मार्क करके लिखो at higher wages in the market comma more people would be able and willing to supply their labor. More people would be able and willing to supply their labor. That is, size of labor force would be bigger. That is, size of labor force would be bigger. Dash, it becomes costly it becomes costly to sit out. It becomes costly to sit out of LF. Next time लिखो labor market. Now DL, SL unemployment, W0 and W1 लिख लो. SL greater than DL, excess supply. SL greater than DL, excess supply bracket में LF greater than number of jobs, therefore unemployment. LF greater than number of jobs, therefore unemployment. Labeling कर देना जरूर. Quantity L and price wages. DL, SL, mark on the two graphs, SL and DL. SL greater than DL, excess supply, bracket में LF greater than number of jobs, therefore unemployment. ये ऊपर इस पार्ट को ऐसे अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट लिख लेना, डिफरेंस को अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. डन. बना लिया सबने. लिखो राइट ऑन. at W1 ब्रैकेट में greater than W0, at W1 ब्रैकेट में greater than W0, ब्रैकेट क्लोज कॉमा. supply exceeds demand, supply exceeds demand, comma, and hence there would be unemployment. There would be unemployment because the wages are higher than equilibrium. There would be unemployment because the wages are higher than equilibrium. Wages are higher than equilibrium. First of as such, wages should adjust. As such, wages should adjust towards the equilibrium, bracket में downward pressure. Wages should adjust towards the equilibrium, bracket में downward pressure, comma, such that eventually there is no excess supply, such that eventually there is no excess supply, comma, and hence zero unemployment, and hence zero unemployment. नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ में however if for some reason comma, wages are prevented from adjusting downwards, wages are prevented from adjusting downwards, or fail to adjust, comma, we would have a permanent situation, of excess supply over demand, What's up? This is wage rate unemployment. This is wage rate unemployment, wage rate UE. This is wage rate UE. Next line में classical economists ascribe, ASCRIBE, classical economists ascribe two prominent reasons. One and two करके लिखो. Classical economists ascribe two prominent reasons. One, minimum wages greater than equilibrium wages. Minimum wages greater than equilibrium wages. That is, it becomes illegal. To hire someone, HIRE, hire. It becomes illegal to hire someone at a lower wage. And second, strong labor unions negotiating for a higher wage, strong labor unions negotiating for higher wages, HIGHER, ये ज़्यादा वाला higher है, dash, it becomes impossible to hire at a lower wage, HIRE, hire. It becomes impossible to hire at a lower wage. Next line, last line है, thus unemployment is explained as being due to inability of wages to adjust towards the equilibrium. Fine, right? Heading 2, types of wages. स्टार मार्क करके लिख लो यहाँ पे. Types of wages. Because we are talking about wages, let's quickly discuss this thing. हम 3 टाइप की वेज डिस्कस करेंगे, फटाफट हो जाएगा. बहुत आसान है, फटाफट डिस्कस करते हैं. इधर देखो सब लोग, क्विकली लेट्स डिस्कस दी डिफरेंट काइंड्स ऑफ वेजेस. वी हैव मिनिमम वेज एंड समथिंग कॉल्ड एज फ्लोर वेज. ये अलग अलग चीजें हैं. लिविंग वेज एंड फेयर वेज. लेट्स डिस्कस. फर्स्ट देखो मिनिमम वेज. लिखो नहीं, इधर देखो यार, देखो लिखवाऊंगा. देखो फर्स्ट इज मिनिमम वेज. मिनिमम वर्ड से क्या समझ में आता है? हाँ, लीस्ट, न्यूनतम, सबसे कम, राइट? दैट इज व्हाट मिनिमम इज. क्लियर है? अभी टेम्परेली दिमाग से निकालो इसको, मिनिमम वर्ड को. whenever the word minimum comes in context of wages, minimum wages, the first thing that should strike your mind is legal, statutory. statutory के बाद minimum लगा देना, as in least लगा देना. लेकिन पहला word statutory होगा. minimum wage is a statutory wage. statute क्या होता है? law. Minimum wage is a statutory minimum, statutory least wage that has to be given. So the word minimum has legal connotation here. Minimum does not mean कि practically सबसे कम wage कौन सी दी जा रही है, वो minimum नहीं है. Minimum मतलब कि सरकार ने by law क्या तय कर रखा है. Government ने by law what has it has decided how much amount of least wage has to be given. Is this clear? Now tell me who can make laws. Legislature. Which legislatures? Both center and states in the respective area of competence. दोनों लॉ बना सकते हैं. जो पढ़ा है ना पॉलिटी में, अगर नहीं पढ़ा होगा तो मालूम होगा. you read in polity classes. Schedule 7 you have got state and union, state and concurrent list. Anything which falls within the purview of center's competent, listen carefully, anything that falls within the purview of center's competence, wages with respect to workers in that thing will be governed by central government minimum wage law. Anything that falls within the purview of state's competence, कोई भी चीज जो कि स्टेट के कॉम्पिटेंस में आती है, उस चीज के रिस्पेक्ट में जो भी लोग काम कर रहे होंगे उनकी वेजेस, मिनिमम वेजेस, स्टेट के मिनिमम वेज लॉ से गवर्न की जाएंगी. स्टैट्यूटरी बॉडी सेंटर एंड स्टेट है. In its area of competence, center makes laws. In its area of competence, states make laws. Anything that falls within the jurisdiction of center, people working in that particular thing, their wages will be governed by minimum wage law of the center government. Anything that is within the purview of state government, people working in that particular entity, that particular kind of business activity would fall within state government's minimum wage law. Therefore, there will be one minimum wage or multiple minimum wages. Multiple. इसीलिए word minimum, न्यूनतम अगर समझोगे तो तुम्हारे दिमाग में आएगा कि केवल एक ही है, least. Minimum is not the least wage. Minimum is a least set of wages. It's not the least but a least set of wages. In UP, whosoever is in something that is governed by center, governed by state का मतलब ये नहीं कि केवल ये सरकारी एम्प्लॉयज के ऊपर लागू होती हैं. प्राइवेट सेक्टर का कुछ भी चीज जो सेंटर के कॉम्पिटेंस में आता है, जो स्टेट के कॉम्पिटेंस में आता है, उसके रिस्पेक्ट में सेंटर भी लॉ बना सकता है, स्टेट भी लॉ बना सकता है, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन देयर कॉम्पिटेंस. Anybody working in that particular area, their wages will be governed by respectively central government law or state government law. For example, in Noida, real estate किसके अंदर आता है? Real estate is center की सरदर्दी या state की सरदर्दी? State. Real estate is governed by state law. So I live in Noida. In my society, which is a private society built by a builder, there are security guards there, there are gardeners there, there are सफाई कर्मचारी there. उन सब की wages, एक प्राइवेट सोसाइटी है, प्राइवेट कंपनी में वो लोग नौकरी करते हैं, बट बिकॉज रियल एस्टेट फॉल्स विद द परव्यू ऑफ स्टेट, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स मिनिमम वेज लॉ विल बी एप्लीकेबल टू देम. इज दिस क्लियर? सबको समझ में आ गया है? तो यूपी में सेंटर का मिनिमम वेज लॉ भी चल रहा होगा, स्टेट का मिनिमम वेज लॉ भी चल रहा होगा. मतलब सेम पर्सन, सिक्योरिटी गार्ड अगर किसी सेंट्रल एंटिटी, सेंट्रली गवर्नड एंटिटी, उसके अंदर जॉब करता है, प्राइवेट सेक्टर सिक्योरिटी गार्ड, प्राइवेट पर्सन इज नॉट एन एम्प्लॉय ऑफ सेंटर और स्टेट, their wages will be governed by central government minimum wage law versus जो state का है उसकी wages govern की जाएंगी by state government minimum wage law. Is this clear to everybody? This is first level of differentiation. Second, minimum wage are not merely different on the basis of who is legislating, whether it is center or state. यूपी और केरला और महाराष्ट्र, minimum wages also differ on the basis of the skill level of the job. सोसाइटी में सिक्योरिटी गार्ड की मिनिमम वेज क्या होगी, गार्डनर की क्या होगी, कुक की क्या होगी, सफाई कर्मचारी की क्या होगी, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन स्किल लेवल ऑल्सो मिनिमम वेजेस विल चेंज. So minimum wages, listen carefully, minimum wages are statutory wages, the least wages that have to be given to any person in a particular kind of job, depending upon the skill level. Any person in a particular kind of job as has been legislated by a respective competent authority, that is center or state. तो कंट्री में कई सारी मिनिमम वेज नहीं चल रही होंगी. यूपी में कई सारी मिनिमम वेजेस हैं, एज इन सेंटर की हैं, यूपी की हैं, और यूपी गवर्नमेंट का जो लॉ है या सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट का लॉ है, उसके अंदर देयर इज अ फर्दर डिस्टिंक्शन बिटवीन ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ टाइप ऑफ जॉब, मीनिंग ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ स्किल लेवल ऑफ द जॉब. So minimum wage is not one least wage. Minimum wage is a set of many least wages. So इसीलिए first thing that should strike is it is a statutory minimum, not merely a minimum. Statutory जब समझोगे तब तुम आगे differentiate कर पाओगे. सबको clear है क्या है minimum wage? Least wage that has to be as in legally given for a particular person in a job depending on skill level as legislated by a competent authority. Floor क्या होता है? You look at let's say UP government's minimum wage law. तो यूपी गवर्नमेंट का एक लॉ होगा कि न्यूनतम वेज कितनी दी जाएगी किसी को, वहां पे उन्होंने लिखा होगा गार्डनर को, कुक को, किसी पर्सन को कितनी वेज दी जाएगी. नाउ यू लुक एट ऑल दीज वेजेस, इसमें से जो लीस्ट वेज किसको दी जा रही है, द लीस्ट ऑफ ऑल मिनिमम वेजेस, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज फ्लोर वेज. Is it clear? You pick up any minimum wage law of Karnataka, of Kerala, of UP, you pick up any minimum wage law, you read that minimum wage law, what is the least of all the least wages that is given, that is called as floor wage. Is it clear? For example, usually, now this is not the case everywhere, but normally what we see is जो floor wage होती है किसी भी state में वो MG नरेगा की wages होती हैं. The wage given to an MG नरेगा worker is usually kept as the floor wage. All wages are above that wage. That becomes the least of all minimum wages. Minimum wage clear हो गया सबको? Minimum wage and floor wage clear है? Okay, next is living and fair. बहुत आसान है living and fair. लिविंग वेज इज अ नॉर्मेटिव वेज. यहां पे तो हमारा स्टैट्यूटरी पार्ट खत्म हो गया, अब लिविंग और फेयर देखते हैं. लिविंग वेज इज अ नॉर्मेटिव वेज. नॉर्मेटिव वर्ड याद है ना, बहुत परेशान करेगा आगे आके भी. नॉर्मेटिव क्या था? नॉर्मेटिव ओपिनियन. गवर्नमेंट हैज टू फॉर्मुलेट अ मिनिमम वेज. इट हैज टू मेक अ लॉ एंड राइट डाउन व्हाट शुड बी द मिनिमम वेज. इट विल कंसल्ट सम एक्सपर्ट्स और नॉट. An expert will give a suggestion that according to me this should be the least that should be paid to anybody because this is what allows them to live a life of basic dignity. Let's say I have a poverty line basket, that is a basket that everybody should be consuming to live a life of basic dignity, and to be able to purchase this basket a person needs to earn this much amount of money. According to me, मेरे according कितनी वेज किसी को दी जानी चाहिए जो कि अलाउ करेगा उस पर्सन को एक लाइफ ऑफ बेसिक डिग्निटी जीना. Different people will have different opinions here or not. Normative. Living wage is the normative wage. The wage that according to some expert allows a person to live a life of basic dignity. Let us say there is some labor dispute going on. एक employer और employee का labor dispute चल रहा था और वो labor dispute सुप्रीम कोर्ट में चला जाता है. क्या सुप्रीम कोर्ट कमेंट नहीं कर सकता है भाई वेजेस बड़ी कम है, आप जो वेजेस अपने एम्प्लॉयज को दे रहे हो, वेजेस आर मच लेस देन लिविंग वेज अकॉर्डिंग टू अस. A person should get at least 50,000 rupees per month and you are paying just 20k rupees per month to this person. Supreme Court can comment. Anybody who gives a comment that any expert will give an opinion that according to me least amount of wage that should be given which allows a person to live a life of basic dignity, that is called as living wage. Is this clear? Living clear हो गया है? Normative wage. अगर मैं आपको बोलूं लिविंग वेज अभी सजेस्ट करने के लिए, तो अगेन आप जैसे बास्केट बनाओगे जैसे हमने पॉवर्टी लाइन में बनाया था, एंड देन यू विल से दैट हाउ मच अमाउंट ऑफ मनी इज रिक्वायर्ड टू बी एबल टू परचेज दैट बास्केट. Chances are when somebody gives an opinion about living wage, this number would be on the higher side or not. अगर मैं आपसे पूछूं कि आप बताओ लिविंग वेज कितनी होनी चाहिए, तो आप बोलोगे सर 30,000 तो कम से कम मिलना ही चाहिए. कोई बोलेगा 40, कोई बोलेगा 50, whatever. Different people have different opinion. Point being, when I ask you to suggest living wage, this living wage will generally be on the higher side. Is this clear? If living wage is on the higher side, what will happen to employment in the country? If government writes living wage as suggested by somebody as minimum wage. अगर सरकार living wage को minimum wage लिख देती है law में, what will happen to unemployment in the country? Will increase or not? अभी हमने discuss किया wage rate unemployment, because living wage is normally on the higher side. If government mandates that everybody will be required to give this living wage, this will create lot of disincentives for firms to hire people. There would be large labor force in the country. As well, on the other hand, firms will not be able to hire people. As a result, there's going to be huge unemployment in the country. Firms become incapable if they have to offer a living wage to their workers. ये बात clear है? Fair wage. A minimum wage, least, a minimum wage might be too low to be acceptable to a worker. When as a worker you approach an employer, you are not asking for minimum wages, you want some living wage. You have some idea in your mind कि मेरे को कम से कम इतना चाहिए. A minimum wage might be too low to be acceptable to a worker. A living wage might be too high to be affordable to the employer. समझ में आ रहा है? मिनिमम बहुत कम है, वर्कर को एक्सेप्टेबल नहीं है, और लिविंग बहुत ज्यादा है, एम्प्लॉयर के लिए अफोर्डेबल नहीं है, इकोनॉमी के लिए भी अफोर्डेबल नहीं है, बिकॉज देयर विल बी हाई अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट एट दिस लिविंग वेज. So the worker and employer are going to negotiate and arrive at some middle ground here. That is called as a fair wage. Something that is acceptable to both parties. Not unaffordable like living wage to the employer, and not unacceptable to the worker because as it's not as low as minimum wage. Something that lies somewhere in between. Between का मतलब यहाँ पे ये नहीं कि upon to कर देंगे इसको. Conceptually lies somewhere in between. It's not as high as living, not as low as minimum. Lies somewhere in between, is acceptable to the both parties. That becomes a fair wage. Is this clear? तीनों wage समझ में आ गई हैं? लिखो. Types of wages लिखो. Number 1, minimum wage. लिखो. It is a statutory minimum. It is a statutory minimum which has to be given to some worker. Full stop. Specifically, comma, it depends on A और B करके लिखना. It depends upon A, the legislating entity, dash the center or the states, center or individual states, in their center or individual states, comma, individual states के बाद comma लगाओ, states के बाद comma लगाओ, comma, in their respective areas of competence, and B, second point, B, the skill level of the job. For example, security guard versus gardener versus unskilled support staff, etc. Next line में hence there is not a single minimum wage. Comma, but multiple minimum wages that exist in a country, in our country. Star mark करके लिख लो. The lowest of all minimum wages, in a minimum wage law, in a minimum wage law is known as floor wage, is known as floor wage. Okay, second लिखो living wage. पहला was minimum wage, second लिखो living wage. Living wage. It is a normative wage. It is a normative wage. It is a normative wage dash. Some expert suggests the least wage that should be given. Some expert suggests the least wage that should be given to any worker to enable him to live a life of basic dignity. To enable him to live a life of basic dignity. So next लिखो fair wage. Fair. FAIR है, किराए वाला फेयर मत लिख देना. Fair wage, FAIR, fair wage. लिखो a minimum wage might be too low. A minimum wage might be too low to be acceptable. A minimum wage might be too low to be acceptable to the workers. Full stop. A fair wage might be too high. Oh, sorry, yes, a living wage, not a fair wage. A living wage might be too high to be affordable to the employers. A living wage might be too high to be affordable to the employers. What's up? Next time, Meghna. A fair wage is a negotiated. A fair wage is a negotiated wage acceptable to the worker, comma, and does not discourage the employer from employing people. Does not discourage the employer from employing more people, Full stop. Conceptually, it lies somewhere between the living and the minimum wage. It lies somewhere between the living and the minimum wage. ठीक है, तीनों वेजेस क्लियर हो गई हैं. मिनिमम, लिविंग एंड फेयर क्लियर है. सुनो, दूसरी क्लास है क्या तुम्हारी? सच्ची में है? मतलब कुछ कौन से बैच की है? अच्छा, एक सेकंड रुको, बोलो क्या सवाल है. बात नहीं करो यार प्लीज, 2 मिनट के लिए और बैठना है तुमको. बोलो. गुड. If there is already some minimum wage set by the government under the law, the question is, why would an employer be paying any higher wage, right? Can anyone answer this question? आसान है वैसे आंसर इसका. हाँ, requirements and skills. अभी तक हमने डिस्कस किया है, एंड दिस सेट्स द टोन फॉर अवर नेक्स्ट क्लास ऑल्सो. वी हैव डिस्कस्ड, आई विल आंसर योर क्वेश्चन. आज हमने डिस्कस किया पहले लॉ ऑफ सप्लाई. सप्लाई इज क्लियर टू एवरीवन. ability and willingness of producers to produce a good, supply. Then we combined demand and supply together and see what happens in the market. In the market, as in merely looking at demand, you don't know what is the price and quantity. Merely looking at supply, you don't know what is the price and quantity. How much quantity of a good will be produced, what will be its price, combined demand and supply. It is the market that determines the price and hence the quantity. And then, baat nahi karo please. And then we applied this concept of demand, supply and then of markets in our labor market. Labor market में हमने क्या देखा? In labor market there are demanders of labor, there are suppliers of labor. Where demand, assuming other factors as constant, is inversely proportional to wages. Supply, assuming other factors as constant, is directly proportional to wages. And we combined demand, supply and saw कि भाई labor market है, इक्विलिब्रियम वेजेस होनी चाहिए, बट इक्विलिब्रियम वेजेस नहीं हो पाती हैं बिकॉज ऑफ टू प्रोमिनेंट रीजंस, मिनिमम वेजेस एंड स्ट्रॉन्ग लेबर यूनियन, एंड हेंस देयर इज गोइंग टू बी परमानेंट केस ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट इन द इकोनॉमी, वेज रेट और क्लासिकल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. एंड नाउ वी हैव सीन दिस डिफरेंट काइंड्स ऑफ वेजेस, मिनिमम वेज, फ्लोर वेज, लिविंग वेज एंड फेयर वेज. इन अवर नेक्स्ट क्लास विल डिस्कस, पहले हमारा फ्रिक्शनल छूटा हुआ है, पहले हम फ्रिक्शनल नेक्स्ट क्लास में डिस्कस करेंगे. वैसे आज कर सकते हैं, इट विल टेक हार्डली 10 मिनट्स, बट कोई बात नहीं, दूसरी क्लास है, सो विल डिस्कस इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास. आफ्टर फ्रिक्शनल विल डिस्कस समथिंग रियली इंपॉर्टेंट, इंटरेस्टिंग. अगेन एज आई सेड इन अवर लास्ट टू लास्ट क्लास कि हमारा अब हनीमून पीरियड खत्म हो चुका है, अब हमको कोर कॉन्सेप्ट्स पढ़ने हैं. नाउ इन अवर नेक्स्ट क्लास वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस समथिंग कॉल्ड एज साइक्लिकल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. साइक्लिकल, we'll understand something called as natural rate of unemployment, and before that cyclical unemployment. cyclical unemployment में भी हमको लगभग 1-1.25 घंटा लगेगा डिस्कस करने के अंदर. I'm just setting the tone of that, जिससे तुम आज घर पे जाओ, वन नोट्स जरूर पढ़ लेना, और दूसरा अपने मटेरियल से साइक्लिकल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट पढ़ना. वहां पे काफी डिटेल में नहीं दिया हुआ है, तो हमको डिटेल में डिस्कस तो क्लास में ही करना है, बट एटलीस्ट रीड फ्रॉम योर मटेरियल व्हाट इज साइक्लिकल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. प्लीज एक सवाल का उत्तर तुमको देना है. Let's take demand of a good. Demand of a good depends upon various factors: price, season, size, size of population, income, taste preferences, culture, etc. Why do we assume other factors as constant, and why do we say price? ऐसा क्या खास बात है प्राइस में कि हमने प्राइस को वेरी किया और बाकियों को कांस्टेंट मान लिया? Why price is given this special treatment? Why not others? Why not income भी तो एक important factor है ना डिमांड डिटरमाइन करने के लिए. टेस्ट प्रेफरेंसेस भी इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है, कई सारे फैक्टर, साइज ऑफ पॉपुलेशन इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है. व्हाई डू वी गिव दिस प्रोमिनेंस टू प्राइस? सवाल समझ में आ रहा है कि नहीं? कि प्राइस में ऐसी क्या खास बात है कि हमने प्राइस को बोला कि प्राइस के साथ रिलेशनशिप देखेंगे डिमांड का क्या है, और बाकियों को सबको कांस्टेंट मान लेते हैं. सीजन को कैसे इफेक्ट करेगा प्राइस? आंसर इसका बहुत सिंपल सा है, लेकिन सोचने पे थोड़ा सा इसके ऊपर, और as in I want you to think about it when you, I will leave it at here, as in I'm going to tell you that why price, but I will leave it at this point and then would expect कि आप इस चीज के ऊपर अपने आप सोचना. उसका सिंपल सा रीजन ये है कि हम बोलते हैं कि प्राइस इज द डोमिनेंट फैक्टर दैट अफेक्ट्स अवर चॉइसेस. अदर फैक्टर्स डू अफेक्ट अवर चॉइसेस, बट आई गिव माई ओपिनियन. आई बीइंग एन एक्सपर्ट, आई विल गिव माई ओपिनियन कि भाई देखो, मैं समझता हूं बाकी सारे फैक्टर्स इफेक्ट करते हैं, लेकिन इन सब में से मेरे अकॉर्डिंग सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट प्राइस है. बाकी भी इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, लेकिन सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट प्राइस है. दैट इज व्हाट आई गिव एन ओपिनियन. नाउ इट इज योर टास्क टू थिंक. इसके बाद अब आपको सोचना है लेबर मार्केट में प्राइस के सिवा क्या कोई और ऐसा फैक्टर हो सकता है जो कि ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है टू डिटरमाइन डिमांड ऑफ लेबर. सोचना है. आई एम श्योर आंसर इज राइट एंड देयर आर मेनी अदर फैक्टर्स. एंड स्किल फैक्टर है. यस, skill is an important factor that determines demand, supply, all these things of labor. You will have to think yourself. हमने जो लेबर मार्केट में अदर फैक्टर्स कांस्टेंट माने हैं डिमांड और सप्लाई के, इनके बारे में अपने आप सोचना कि और क्या फैक्टर हो सकते हैं जो कि एक फर्म की डिमांड डिटरमाइन करेंगे, नंबर 1. एंड सेकंड ये सोचना है कि इन फैक्टर में से क्या कोई ऐसा फैक्टर है जो कि प्राइस से ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकता है. क्वेश्चन समझ में आ गया है तुम सबको कि क्या किस चीज के ऊपर सोचना है. आई एम नॉट गिविंग द आंसर बट आई एम सिंपली एक्सप्लेनिंग द क्वेश्चन टू यू. देयर आर मेनी फैक्टर्स दैट विल डिटरमाइन डिमांड ऑफ लेबर. Price of labor, that is wages, is one of those factors, and till now we have assumed price to be the most important factor. My question to you or your task up till next class is, 1, you read the notes, 2nd, you read cyclical unemployment, and 3rd, you ponder upon this question yourself as to what may be the other factor that determine demand of labor, and is any of those factors more important than price of labor. We'll discuss it from here in the next class. ठीक है, जाओ.